as they jeopardized the temporary ceasefire between the United States and Iran. The IDF said it was targeting Hezbollah sites in Lebanon, but Israeli forces reportedly detained a Spanish UN peacekeeper and fired warning shots at an Italian convoy. Madrid and Rome demanded answers from the Israeli government, with the Italian foreign minister warning of a second Gaza. EU officials also warned that high prices and potential shortages of jet fuel could last into the summer.
Meanwhile, NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte said that member countries are doing everything US President Donald Trump had requested to strengthen the military alliance, even if some were initially a bit slow to provide support to America and its war with Iran. Kate Fisher reports from Washington.
The two men met at the White House on Wednesday amid tensions within the alliance over the Iran war. The US president has threatened to withdraw from the transatlantic security alliance in recent weeks. He argues that European allies haven't provided enough support for the US war in Iran while relying on US security guarantees. The NATO chief acknowledged that some allies were a bit slow to support the US. He noted they were also a bit surprised, given President Trump opted not to inform them before starting the war. But he argued that today allies are providing a massive amount of support, saying they've heard and are responding to President Trump's requests. On Thursday morning, Mr. Trump posted on social media that NATO was very disappointing.
The fertility rate in the US hit another record low last year. Fresh federal data shows that the number of births fell by 1% to just over 3.6 million. Tony Waterman has more.
The U.S. fertility rate has been in decline since 2007. Nearly 23% fewer babies are born now than then. Teenage pregnancies have seen the sharpest declines and are now sitting at record lows. The data shows that fertility rates among women in their 30s and 40s are actually increasing, but it's not enough to offset a slowdown among younger women. Experts say the high cost of childcare, housing, and a desire by women to have careers are among the many reasons why the fertility rate continues to fall. Tony Waterman, Washington.
And finally, Moscow announced a short-term Easter truce with Ukraine for the weekend. Kiev agreed to respond in kind if Russia indeed observes the proposed ceasefire. The Ukrainian leader also announced that preparations are underway for a new round of settlement talks with Russia, expected in the near future. Daria Bondarchuk has more from Moscow.
The two-day ceasefire announced by Russian President Vladimir Putin is scheduled to begin at 4 p.m. local time on Saturday, April 11, and would last until the end of Sunday, the 12th of April. Moscow said it has seen Kiev's statements that it's ready to support the truce and expects Ukraine to follow Russia's lead. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky promised to act accordingly in case Moscow too refrains from new strikes. He also said that preparations for a new round of settlement talks with Russia and the United States are underway. Negotiations could take place in the form of a trilateral meeting or a round of shuttle diplomacy, with Moscow and Kyiv talking to the American side separately. Daria Bondarchuk, Moscow.
From Feature Story News in New York, I'm Mitch McCann, and that was the Week in Review.
This is William Chambers. Now a retired insurance salesman, Chambers is just one of over 95% of grandfathers who, according to a new report from the Center of Business Intelligence, secured their first and only job by walking right up to the owner of a business and asking for a position right then and there.
I slammed my fist on the desk and said, "I'm your man." He stood right up. He shook my hand and he said, "You come in first thing Monday morning."
According to the report, nearly 36% of grandfathers claim that they found employment by entering a local business with nothing but a nickel in their pockets and a shirt on their backs. 24% saw a fine-looking marquee for a business and said, "Someday my name's going to be on that sign." And 40% of grandfathers said they snuck into the CEO's office and said, "Mr. McKinley, sir, I'm your guy."
It just took gumption. You didn't need some fancy internship. Looking the boss dead in the eye and showing him you were a man. That was your internship.
This is the Onion News Network.
You can help spread the ideas of liberty with our Patreon for just $5 per month at amps.freetalklive.com.
Free Talk Live.
Free Talk Live, talk radio that you control, and 603-283-6160 is the phone number for you to get in on the conversation with us. The point of Free Talk Live is for anyone to get in on the conversation with us and talk about whatever is on their mind. And with you on Free Talk Live tonight, you've got me, Bonnie, in the studio. Sorry.
Am I live yet? Okay. Mr. Penguin.
And remotely,
it's Mark Edge.
Yay, it's all successful.
Hey, Mark.
We have Mark's face in the streams. We have
Penguin.
His voice. Yay, it's all working. We're streaming on X tonight, aka Twitter. I mean, I usually call it Twitter.
Wait.
We do have some interesting, kind of bad news to talk about. I heard about this last night at a party, a bunch of libertarians, so this came up, actually.
It's interesting.
Apparently, we're all going to have to get new routers in America, right? Or else we'll get fined or something?
No.
Basically, it sounds like they're trying to nationalize routers in America.
Oh, it's the stupidest thing. So their reasoning doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But basically, they're trying to move manufacturing of routers back to the U.S. on some security nonsense basis, even though the problems that they're citing have nothing to do with the place of manufacture. It has everything to do with the software and the poor quality of the code, basically, and the proprietary software, actually. More specifically, it hinders the manufacturers from providing basically secure products, and as a consequence, you get scattered security updates, but the updates don't affect they're limited what security updates you get. You don't get updates for everything, and as a consequence, you end up with a situation where every router on the market is, well, except there's one exception, and I'm a little bit biased party here, but every router on the market is basically it's vulnerable to exploitation by basically anybody, really, anybody who's got the skill set to hack, so to speak. And in this particular case, their fear, I think, is Russia and China. And
so basically, they're saying that we can't have routers in our house that were made by China, Russia, out of foreign countries.
Yeah, basically.
And they're going to basically make us all have to buy American-made ones, which will, come with whatever the heck they want us to have in our houses.
Well, it's kind of like there's so many different issues with routers and just computers in general nowadays with government regulations and FCC related restrictions, and so the problem is with the quality of the software, and you don't get better quality software just because you move the location of manufacturing of the routers to the United States. The exploitation, the vulnerabilities that are being exploited are still there, regardless of where they're being manufactured, because these aren't back doors that they're including, that China is like secretly inserting. There's ways to solve that problem potentially if it was in software, and that's through doing random sampling on the receiving end within the United States of some of these routers to say, hey, does this firmware that has been flashed by some Chinese corporation match what we actually instructed them to flash? And if it does, then there's no back door, basically. But that's not where the problem is. The problem. This
is cash for clunkers for routers.
Are they going to give us cash?
I don't even know. I mean, it's as stupid as it might be as stupid as that type of program. But yeah, I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous, and it kind of gets worse because we don't even have the manufacturing capacity in the United States to produce routers or any real electronics, other than some pretty sophisticated stuff for the military. But like for the most part, manufacturing as far as consumer electronics goes has been outsourced for decades and decades and decades now, probably close to 30 years or so. So the idea that we don't have the supply chains in the United States. We don't have the components in the United States to manufacture it. We don't have the facilities. We don't have the pick and place machines. We don't have any of this stuff in the United States to do any of this stuff basically.
So what's going to happen by their
demanding.
deadline that they're trying to demand if we don't have American-made routers?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. It's an interesting question, but prices are already going through the roof for this stuff. I don't know if anybody else has noticed it, but I'll just give you an example. So this is not specific to Trump or, anything of that nature, but basically the AI, and what's been going on here lately is the AI industry has bought up the manufacturing capacity. And so all the RAM...
What, for their data centers?
For data centers, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So the AI industry is building out these data centers, and they've literally purchased... or it's under contract, I guess, the manufacturing capacity. So they have to basically tweak the machines to manufacture a different kind of product, basically, for that industry. And so the capacity that remains, the very little bit of capacity that remains, is not anywhere near enough to fulfill the demand for everything else. And by everything else, I mean everything. Like, we're not just talking computers, like desktops and laptops. We're talking about phones, your answering machine, your router, all of these things. Anything that has any kind of, flash or RAM in it, basically, is going to go up. It's skyrocketing in price. So just as an example, I'm going to give you an example of a computer that maybe a couple months ago was $1,000. Right now, we're probably looking at a decent computer. We're probably looking at about $5,000.
A year ago?
No, not a year ago. We're talking about months. In the last couple of months, this is what the prices have jumped to, roughly.
Whoa.
Okay, so we're talking about like 5 times the price for all sorts of stuff. I've mostly just paid attention to the like hard disks and RAM and computers, but it's not exclusive to this. Like your Raspberry Pi, little computers even. Mm-hmm. It doesn't really matter what kind of computer it is. Anything that has RAM or hard drives in it, or some sort of flash in it, is basically going to, skyrocketing price. So graphics cards, for example, the new models that are coming out are going to have half as much RAM for the high end. Same thing for graphics cards, phones. Phones are another great example. Phones, you're going to get the new high end models are going to have half as much RAM as they did last year. You think that you get more RAM, all these things usually go up over time, right? But nope, we're going the other way now. And the prices are actually going to skyrocket out of control. Probably, it's hard to tell exactly when, but it might be, anywhere between a couple of months to, a year. But basically, the problem here is if you think the Bitcoin, booms have been, insane in terms of, money go up. Well, the prices on computers and electronics, it's going to dwarf that probably.
Wow.
That's at least that's my prediction, right?
And is this all due to, or not? Okay, you said this isn't all due to anything Trump's doing, but is this thing with the routers going to make all that worse?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just think about like even if it costs 5 times as much and then multiply it by another 5 times, and remember, like, we're not out of stock yet of what's already been manufactured, but there's only a handful of companies that actually manufacture RAM, and there's only a handful, for example, that sell RAM basically too. So you end up with a situation where the companies that are manufacturing the RAM no longer are manufacturing it for consumers. So you won't be able to get it. It's not an issue of there's not going to be enough supply. It's more of an issue you won't be able to get it kind of issue. That's how bad things are. So there's a couple of PC manufacturers who have stocked up, and they've said that they've had they basically have like a year worth of stock. Is what they've said that they've secured, something along those lines. But the problem is that a year worth of stock at normal demand, or is that a year worth of stock at accelerated demand? Because think of it this way. If you've got, let's say you have 6 computer manufacturers and 2 of them have secured a year worth of stock. And let's say the other, what did I say, 2, 4, so the other 4 don't have any stock, right? Well, what do you think is going to happen to the 2 that have a year worth of stock? Their demand's going to increase.
They're going to get rich.
They're going to be rich, but their demand's going to increase, right? They're not going to have a year worth of stock anymore. We're talking about maybe months worth of stock, right? So you end up with this situation where, and it could be a matter of months. I don't know, like if they've in their forecasts they've included increased demand or not. But the point that I'm making is, somewhere in the next couple of months to maybe the next year at most, right? The prices are not going to, multiply by 5 times. They've already done that. You're literally going to not be able to afford a computer. Like, think about buying a car, right? The prices have gone up. Well, now you're going to have to pay for a computer maybe in a year what you're paying for a car today, right? So maybe it'll be even more than that. I don't know. It's it's like I'm kind of guessing here based on what I know. But the prices, when you can't, when the market cannot supply something, right? Everybody knows it doesn't matter how much money you have, you can't get it, right? And that's basically what we're going to be seeing here shortly. So if you have not gotten an if you need a new phone, you think you're going to need it in the next.
Just thinking about this.
Yeah, if you're going to need a new phone in the next 3-4 years, you probably, even though the prices are 5 times what they were a couple months ago, you probably should get one now, because if you don't, you won't be able to, or if you are, you're going to be paying some astronomical amount of money, and you're already going to be paying an astronomical amount of money, even if you get one right now. If you go online, you start looking at phones. Just to give you an idea, like I'm trying to think what the prices were for like hard disks. Like an 8 terabyte. Let's put it this way: like an 8 terabyte SSD drive. I was just looking at this today. Is probably going to run you somewhere like $2,300, $2,500. That's just for the hard drive. That's not for the computer. We had an order come in today, and the price for a decent system, I was actually shocked. It was $5,000. This isn't for a super high-end system. This is just for a decent system.
What does it cost normally?
About $1,000, probably. Well, no, probably about closer to $1,500. So $1,500 is now maybe $5,000. The prices at the very, very kind of lower end sort of, but decent, you're still talking about maybe $1,000, $1,500, something like that. But we're talking about like 8 gigabytes of RAM and maybe like a 250 gigabyte hard drive SSD, something like that.
Is that small?
Yeah, 250 is really kind of small. You probably are looking at more like, what's normal these days is probably something closer to 2 to 4 terabytes and like 32 to 64 RAM, not 8 gigabytes of RAM. So if you're talking about 8 gigs of RAM with a 250 gig drive on a decent system, you can find cheaper systems out there probably, but we're talking about decent
quality. There's no way this is like something temporary.
No. So we're talking about right now, the estimate is like 3 to 4 years before there's maybe supply again in the marketplace is the estimate. So they've got, the AI industry has basically said all of 2026's manufacturing capacity has been secured by the AI industry basically. And then 2027 it may already be secured 2027 now as well. So then let's see, and then the companies that produce like the RAM, for example, I'm trying to think if it's Crucial. It might be Crucial. They and a couple others. It's not just Crucial, but they're getting out of the market completely. So like you can't even get it. Like they're winding down their manufacturing capacity. I think they've already shut down at this point. So like anything that you find on the market right now is stuff that they've already manufactured basically, and it's whatever's left. So we've already begun to see sort of the apocalypse in terms of any kind of electronics. It's just, we haven't.
Do you think that the whole boom in the price of silver recently has anything to do with these data centers? Like they need silver for their parts or something?
It's increasing the cost of electronics, for what I understand.
Oh, just the silver price going up.
Yeah.
But do you think that...
I don't know if it's a cause or not. It might be, I don't know exactly where silver is used specifically in the various industries. It might be like, I don't even know. I couldn't even guess. Really,
how much or...
Yeah, like what kind of, quantities are needed by, which industry, like, or which parts of the industry. Like, for example, there's certain things that go into batteries, and I'm off the top of my head, I don't remember specifically what goes into them. But there's certain things that go into batteries, and there's certain things that go into, the solder that goes on the motherboard or the motherboards or the electronic, the boards that you basically have in
I
your
heard
computers.
that the price of silver went up so high so fast that the places that normally smelt them or whatever, the refineries that buy them from, you go and sell your silver at a silver shop, and the silver shop sells it to the refinery. The refineries are currently unable to take any more silver. It's not just like, oh, there's such a high amount. It's because the price caused the banks that give these silver refineries loans, it caused the banks to stop giving them their typical like free interest-free loans. The banks have to be like, no, we're going to have to give you this like expensive loan. So then the people trying to sell their silver to these manufacturers are basically getting priced out. or I said manufacturers, I meant to say to these refineries, it's a little convoluted, or maybe I'm making it sound more convoluted than it is, but basically more refineries have to be built, and the price needs to go down for silver to even be easy to sell right now in a large enough quantity.
So they don't have the refinement capacity, I'm guessing is what you're trying to say. So people are trying to sell silver to the refineries to melt it down to recycle it basically and reuse it, but that industry doesn't have the capacity to melt down the silver.
Yeah, actually, it might not have much to do with the capacity as much as these refineries, they need a temporary loan from a bank in order to, and then they get as much silver as they can get at that price. Because if you think about it, if you just call up a silver refinery, you're like, I have this much silver to sell you, it's like the price could go down on the way that it's driven there. So that's why they need these banks as these like guaranteed, we'll take it at this price type of thing.
Okay.
That's why it's a loan. And right now the loans,
are they using the loans to secure the silver
on the way to the refinery?
Onto the way to the refinery. Okay, I understand.
So there is something broken about the chain that normally is in the market in silver.
Okay.
And I think people said more refineries need to be built, but also just I think the price needs to like stabilize. So like something really weird is going on is what I'm basically saying. It's like if suddenly the price of gas went to like $30, like something would break. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so gas is definitely something that's increasing the price of everything too. I don't know what we've talked about on Free Talk Live or not, but it's been all over the media, right? The Strait of Hormuz, if I said that right, yeah.
Yep.
That's basically been shut down by the Iranians, and this is going to affect everything from food prices to, I mean, it literally affects everything. I mean, just think about it for a moment, because your electronics, what are they made of? They're made of plastic. Where does plastic come from? Oil. Oil is coming from, the Strait of Hormuz or Hormuz.
It apparently comes from Ahura Mazda, so the word for God in the Zoroastrian religion. So Ahura, it kind of has that Hormuz sound.
Yep. So I will say though, I don't think the oil situation in some respects is quite as bad as the electronic situation, in the sense that we have there's still oil being produced.
Yeah, apparently there's a bunch of oil in Texas. Why doesn't the price have nothing to do with the Strait of Hormuz? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean it has to do with the fact that the United States sells oil externally. So unless we were to shut down or stop the ability of the oil industry in the United States to sell externally, I think
export. Yeah,
export. So if we stopped exports, in other words, I think that would be the only way to get the price to come down, because then there would be less demand in the marketplace.
Yeah,
but you can't. I don't necessarily know that you can just do that, right? Like, I mean, think about it. It would be like coming into somebody's bank account or your retirement funds, and you'd be seizing money from there in order to. I mean, it would be like, so I mean, it would basically be socialization, or socialism basically, except it would be stealing from people through a different means and only select people, as opposed to taxation that in theory gets applied. I guess it's not evenly, but it's at least applied in maybe a somewhere more of a logical fashion. And it's not like if you actually cause if you stopped exports, it's an interesting question. Like if you stopped exports, it's still, you'd have to make sure that the price that the refineries are getting, and actually it's even more complicated than that, because, okay, so you have to understand how the oil industry works. So the United States extracts oil from the ground in the United States. However, that oil doesn't get refined here. It gets shipped outside the United States for refinement.
Like chicken nuggets. So they raise the chickens here. Okay. They send it to I don't know if it's China. They send it.
Really?
Maybe they slaughter it here too, but they send it to get processed in other countries and then bring it back. And that's really gross to me.
Okay. That doesn't surprise me. It's probably a labor thing. So yeah, basically, the reason for the oil refinement elsewhere. So we have refineries in the United States for oil. It's just that the refinement of the type of oil that U.S. refineries refine is not the type that comes out of the ground in the United States. So we import oil for refinement, we refine it, and then it gets exported again. And the same thing happens, but in reverse. For oil that comes out of the ground in the United States, it gets exported. I'm not even entirely sure where it gets exported for the refinement, but somewhere in the world, they have factories or factories, whatever you call them,
refineries,
right? That can refine U.S. extracted oil, but then once it's refined, it gets sold back to the United States.
I don't know where they refine oil, but I would say that most oil is owned before it's pumped out of the ground through futures contracts, and so essentially, if the United States government decided it wanted to stop oil from being exported, it would be, affecting the ownership of all these people that already own the oil before it's pumped out of the ground.
Right. I think.
Yeah. I mean, so that's basically what I was trying to say. And I think what people also don't understand is like, especially people who are more on the left, is that if you start doing things like basically theft in that sense, you're not just stealing from oil companies, you're stealing from people who have invested in those oil companies. And you may be an investor in the oil companies and you not even understand this because of the way that retirement plans are and things of that nature. That money that you're not managing, somebody else is managing it, but that's being invested in things like oil, right?
Wow.
So if you started to steal from the oil companies, you're actually going to end up causing your own investments or your own retirement to decline from an economics perspective.
For the record, I wasn't saying we should do something like that. I just didn't understand all how this worked until you guys explained it.
Yeah.
I was like, we have oil here.
Right. And I
think you're right in this, Bonnie, in so much as this was one of the ways it was all pitched to us, right? Is that, well, there might be an temporary increase in the price of oil, but don't worry, America has lots of oil. And that makes sense on its face and probably caused some of the people who had, some reservations about an invasion to say, yeah, well, then maybe we could help the Iranian people. And that's kind of the pitch.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, what ultimately is going to happen, almost certainly, is that the price of oil is going to go up around the world, and because it's an international market. We don't have control over our own oil in some respects, and anything that affects the prices elsewhere also affects the prices here ultimately.
Well, more Free Talk Live is coming up. 603-283-6160 is the phone number to call. You can get in on the conversation with us. You can change the subject, talk about whatever you want, or you can tell us what you think about what we're talking about. More Free Talk Live coming up. Don't go anywhere.
Costco, even if you're not a member? I'm Holland Cook with Inflation Hacks. That membership fee sure is worth it if you shop deliberately. I have learned to avoid that large carton of chocolate-covered malted milk balls and other impulse buys, but Costco has the lowest prescription drug prices, and you don't need to be a member. Just tell the greeter you're there for the pharmacy, and you can shop without the Warehouse Club membership for other items via Instacart. If you are a member, you're probably in on the secret. Costco's Kirkland products are produced by major brand manufacturers. I have it on good authority that Costco vodka is made from Grey Goose's water source, and it's even scored higher in taste tests. Aggregate booze rankings rates it 88, and the Goose only got an 82. How are you coping? Post your inflation hacks on the blog at andyoucanquoteme.com.
From Feature Story News in New York, I'm Mitch McCann with the Week in Review. US President Donald Trump says the US military will remain in the Middle East to ensure that Iran opens the Strait of Hormuz. In a social media post, Mr. Trump detailed America's non-negotiables ahead of talks with Iran. Nick Harper reports from Washington.
Donald Trump is making it clear that he wants what he wants and he's prepared to use the US military to get it. He says that all US ships, aircraft and military personnel with additional ammunition and weaponry will remain in place in and around Iran. That's until both sides reach what he's calling a real agreement. And he flags two sticking points, red lines for the US. That Iran must have no nuclear weapons and that the Strait of Hormuz must be open and safe. The US president sticking to those positions and making it clear he will not concede on those points. He said if those don't happen, then the shooting starts. More threats that are showing the cracks in diplomacy ahead of planned talks between the US and Iran in Pakistan. I'm Nick Harper in Washington.
European leaders voiced alarm this week over the situation in Lebanon and its impact on the fragile US-Iran truce. The Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez said Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's contempt for life and international law was intolerable. Ross Cullen reports.
The French Foreign Ministry said the strikes by the IDF were, quote, all the more unacceptable as they jeopardise the temporary ceasefire between the United States and Iran. The IDF said it was targeting Hezbollah sites in Lebanon, but Israeli forces reportedly detained a Spanish UN peacekeeper and fired warning shots at an Italian convoy. Madrid and Rome demanded answers from the Israeli government, with the Italian foreign minister warning of a second Gaza. EU officials also warned that high prices and potential shortages of jet fuel could last into the summer.
Meanwhile, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte said that member countries are doing everything US President Donald Trump had requested to strengthen the military alliance, even if some were initially a bit slow to provide support to America and its war with Iran. Kate Fisher reports from Washington.
The two men met at the White House on Wednesday amid tensions within the alliance over the Iran war. The US president has threatened to withdraw from the transatlantic security alliance in recent weeks. He argues that European allies haven't provided enough support for the US war in Iran while relying on US security guarantees. The NATO chief acknowledged that some allies were a bit slow to support the US. He noted they were also a bit surprised, given President Trump opted not to inform them before starting the war. But he argued that today allies are providing a massive amount of support, saying they've heard and are responding to President Trump's requests.
From Feature Story News in New York, I'm Mitch McCann, and that was the Week in Review.
Yep, we still do email. Drop your email address in the entry box at freetalklive.com, and you'll be kept in the loop with Free Talk Live.
It's Free Talk Live, talk radio that you control. That means that 603-283-6160 is the phone number you can call to get in on the conversation with us tonight. 603-283-6160. ForkFest 2026 has had multiple changes. Please pay attention as this info may be new to you, at least new as of the last month or so. June 22nd to the 29th at the Northern Waters Outfitters Campground in Errol, New Hampshire. It's like Eggroll with another R and no G. The owner has offered to host 100 campers at his campground, which is being closed just for ForkFest. Anyone who'd like to stay in the surrounding area may come for a day pass for free. But staying the night there tenting is $10 per person per night. Anyone who'd like to... The only real restriction he's given us, the owner of this campground, is no nudity, which I think we can deal with after the crazy restrictions Rogers started imposing on us the last couple years. ForkFest.party, that's not Porkfest with a P, it's ForkFest with an F, F-O-R-K Fest.party for more info, and ForkFest2026@gmail.com to sign up as one of the 100 campers. And I'm going, you're going, right, Chris?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Mr. Penguin, sorry. With you on the show tonight, you've got me, Bonnie.
And Mr. Penguin.
And Mark Edge. I will probably not be at ForkFest this year, but I saw pictures of the campground. I don't remember the name of it, but they're in Errol. Mm-hmm. And Gluten Freeman sent them to me, and it is gorgeous.
Yeah, it's going to be so fun. I'm so excited. So anybody's allowed to go there. You don't have to be from New Hampshire. In fact, I actually have been I've obviously been talking about it on the air since we organized this, but I haven't been going out of my way to tell that many free staters about it. Of course, I've told all the regular ForkFest people, and then people that we all like and get along with, but I'm going to try to get as many people as possible at the LNC in Michigan next month.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly,
we need foreigners.
That's kind of the point of these festivals, is to introduce people from outside the state to New Hampshire and show them what it's like to be around other like-minded libertarians, I guess. Right. And the idea is for people to hopefully move here and join us in our crusade. I don't know if that's a good choice of word, but our fight basically for
I don't like that word.
to reserve not reserve, but to
preserve liberty.
Preserve,
yeah.
Liberty
it's
somewhere
failing
in the world.
everywhere else in the world, but not New Hampshire.
Liberty's not failing.
People are failing
losing
liberty?
We're
Okay.
losing our freedoms everywhere. Basically, is what it comes down to. So
Yeah, I forget some of us are a little more religious about the word liberty than others. I'm just kidding. But so liberty's not failing. We're failing it in the rest of the world, but not New Hampshire. That's what I think.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what you're trying to say exactly, but yeah, I get where you're going. I think with it is that
Well,
so
what I'm saying is that these festivals are the largest recruitment tool we have for the Free State Project, and the great New Hampshire freedom migration, whatever terminology you want to use for libertarians moving to New Hampshire, and I'd hate to see any slowdown in that movement. In fact, I want to see an increase. I think we're all better off. There may be some some hurt feelings going on right now, but I think we're all better off in New Hampshire than we are scattered across the United States. We tried that.
I think
for
that's something
30 or 40 years, and it didn't work.
Yeah, I think, Mark, that's one thing that no matter what kind of differences we might have, we can all agree on, right? Yeah. Like, here, this is it. Tens of thousands of people have moved or in the process of moving, and we've got 100 reps in the House, and we got another five out of 24 in the Senate.
Yeah. I don't think they've acted very free stater, but at least two of them.
Yeah, two of them I think are more so than the other.
Yeah, right.
The other three, but anyway, it's a good start nonetheless.
Right, because the Senate is kind of locked down.
Yeah, and that's, I think 2017 we had like 17 in the House, and that was it. And if we went from 17 in like 2017 to 100 in 2026, and
they're sneaky. I learn things all the time where I'm like, whoa, I didn't know that person was with us, and yeah, because they're sneaky, and the Dems aren't going to be able to sniff them out and stuff. It's awesome. I love it.
Interesting.
They're like really highly organized, more than I thought, and it's awesome. So.
Yeah, I think a lot of people aren't signing up for the Free State Project any longer, that there's no list to sign up for. This is the difficulty is that now we've got the Dems in this kind of this conspiracy theory loop
a frenzy,
where they're like, who's a Free Stater and who isn't? And I don't know, how do you define the term Free Stater? They recently had a special election. This guy up in, some northern New Hampshire place, it was a special election. And the Dems just do better during special elections. They just can get their voters out better than the Republicans can. And they beat this guy. Now, this guy had never left the state, or never, he was born in the state, and he was a Free Stater. They called him Free Stater over and over and over again until it's like, what's a Free Stater? He didn't know and didn't have a good defense for it. And now they think this is their tactic. Now, I hope they think this is their tactic, because I don't think it's very well branded. I don't think a good large percentage of New Hampshire Granite Staters just simply don't know what a Free Stater is. I thought of a Free Stater when I first heard it as somebody from New Hampshire.
Oh, interesting.
Really? I would thought that everybody that was like a new mover or a mover early on like you just thought of it as Free State Project signers.
I'd heard the term beforehand, and I just thought it was an odd insult, which is what they, all along it's tried to be, but it's not a very good insult when it's the live free or die state.
Yeah.
Well, aren't Free Staters? So I looked it up on AI because you said so, Bonnie, and I did find out that if you ask AI what a Free Stater is, they don't come up for New Hampshire until number 3.
Well, does it say Maryland?
It does say Maryland.
I was right.
Which I think is ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. But that's their motto. It's the Free State. I mean, it's ridiculous, really? Yes, because, they have Baltimore and all that stuff.
Maryland? Oh, wow. Yeah, definitely not a place you'd want to live.
By the way, Maryland was a slave state even through the Civil War. It was just, Lincoln didn't even free the slaves there with the Emancipation Proclamation. It was only in the states that had seceded.
Yeah, but they got forced to work for the Union.
Yeah, I'm really amazed at the amount of content that sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Malign. What's the word I'm looking for, guys?
Yeah, maligns the Free Staters. Yeah,
the malign the Free Staters. I was watching a video on YouTube that came out in the last couple of months by this guy from I think the UK. Anyway, he clearly has a sort of a left-wing bias here, but it was just like he covered what was that, the Freetown Project in that book or whatever they came.
Yep, the Grafton.
Anyway, literally his
bears.
His entire thing was straight out of that book. Clearly that he did his spiel, and it was just so bad. Like the whole thing was so terrible. It was comical and it was good. Like entertaining content about like why libertarianism doesn't work,
but it's fake. It's literally built on lies.
Right,
that book
exactly.
About Grafton and everything.
And that's exactly it. And I just thought it was hilarious. And I'm just like,
you know what's really interesting and crazy? Recently on Twitter or X, Elon Musk got rid of. Well, he added a new thing where your tweets are automatically translated to the viewer. So basically I can write in English, but it can go to a Japanese person and it's automatically translated so they can see it. And ever since that happened, the Japanese, they were going and saying, we love Americans and we always like to wear cowboy hats and we love Texas. And that was like really cute. But so one thing they started doing was like message or tweeting at us in New Hampshire and saying like, is it true that you guys are the freest state? And also we saw this book about Grafton, and people like go back and forth educating them, and this group of Japanese libertarians wrote their own rebuttal to the Grafton book, which is awesome. Everybody needs to be like
funny
retweeting that or whatever.
Rebuttal meaning like
they saw
saying
that,
how it was wrong.
Yeah, they were like, hey, what do you guys have to say about this? And people were replying, like Jeremy Kaufman and other people were replying, like saying why it's wrong and why it's stupid. And one of the reasons, if people don't know, is that the Fish and Game expert, I don't know, one of the top fish and game bureaucrats in New Hampshire came out and said there is no evidence that there was an increase in bear sightings or bear incidents in Grafton at that time. And so it should just be over. The conversation should be over, but the Dems just keep pushing this stupid lie that the libertarians moved to Grafton and left trash everywhere and caused bears to come out, which wasn't true.
It's even more entertaining in how they claim that it sort of failed. And I think that's also kind of just humorous because like we know people in Grafton. Like there's people who have moved in recent years to Grafton. They moved to New Hampshire for the Free State Project, and they've moved to Grafton just, because I mean, the thing is we're all over New Hampshire, right? So like even if the Freetown Project fizzled out in some respect, it's like still a ton of libertarians up there, right? And that's just the thing. It's like, so one thing sort of fizzled out and it turned into the whole state. Okay, maybe, but like it I'm not really sure that that's a failure. That's sort of a success in some sense because we no longer are just a town. We literally have the whole state. I don't know.
I'm of the opinion that honestly that we've already. I shouldn't say we've already won. Let me restate that. The momentum that Free Staters have in New Hampshire, and these are, let's call them liberty-minded people, because I don't know what Free Stater means.
Yeah, sure.
I'm pretty confused on this topic. So liberty-minded people in New Hampshire have a lot of momentum. There's currently 166 out of 400. 166 out of 400 state reps are rated B+ or better, 80% or better by the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance.
Oh, wow. I never even thought about it like that.
It's already true. We have a libertarian veto. Your bill will not pass unless you get the conservatives, the progressives, two of the conservatives, the progressives, and the libertarians to agree with your bill. And these aren't political parties. I didn't state them as political parties.
Yeah.
And I know that it's confusing because a lot of people, Democrat and Republican, would like the libertarians just go live in the Libertarian Party. Hey, we had you all corralled in and insignificant, and now you've run amok, and we're mad about it. And it's ridiculous because we tried to work with the Dems for years back in the day. And they were terrible about it.
The trolls, the Free Talk Live trolls that don't really have a place right now. So sorry, the Element thing is down and everything. The Matrix. They were mad at me once. Oh,
they're like a hate group, man. Like the Dems are like serious.
The trolls that are not Dems. I'm not talking about the Dems. The Free Talk Live listeners who we call the trolls because they like to troll us.
Yeah, sure.
This one specific group, they got really mad at me because I basically went and testified for legalized DMT bill that was Matt Santonastaso's in 2022, I think it was. And I was like, Free Staters, what we need to do is work with the Dems because these Dems were talking to me and they seem great. And the trolls were really mad and they were like, you don't know what you're talking about. We know more about New Hampshire than you, and like you need to like focus in on the right. And I was really like, no, I think you're wrong. But I was proven totally wrong because the those Dems that talked to me went and voted opposite of the way they talked to me about voting. Those Dems vote on the party line even for things that most Democrats support. It's like we don't have any hope of working with the Dems and getting liberty through New Hampshire.
The thing that drives me nuts is about the Democrats and the Republicans they're so hypocrites and they're so similar. It's like I can't tell the
in
Democrat
national politics, sure, not in New Hampshire. Because in New Hampshire, libertarians have taken over the Republicans, and they're
in New Hampshire. It gets even more
same.
confusing because you're right in some respects that it's. I mean, I don't want to say okay. So we still do have a lot of Democrats and Republicans in New Hampshire, I think. But the point that I'm trying to make is simply is that there's the two parties are so similar in so many ways. You know, I mean, if you think about it, like the Republicans may be a little bit more swayed when it comes to funding, the military, but the Democrats still do the military too. So,
in New Hampshire, for example, they're so different that the GOP just added campus carry to their actual platform.
Yeah, the Republican platform.
That's not happening in other states. I haven't seen.
So I think somebody said at Social Sunday today that we were at that it was there may be something along the campus carry in other states, but not like it's being proposed in New Hampshire or something like that.
The other thing about it is like the Dems in most other states would be the ones trying to pass legalizing drug bills, and in New Hampshire the Dems will go against that just to simply spite the Republicans, and the Republicans are voting and putting these bills in. Right,
exactly
they're the more freedom-loving.
The Republicans and Democrats aren't very, very similar to one another. They don't have any kind of rational, sound consensus as far as like what it is that they're for or against, and it's just sort of like we're against whatever the Republicans. That's not true in New Hampshire. Well, that might. I don't know if that's not true in New Hampshire. I think that's still true in New Hampshire. I just think we have so many libertarians or more libertarian-leaning reps that
only on the right. None of them are on the left.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Democrats and the left, sort of the left in New Hampshire, is so small. It's just such a tiny. They're almost non-existent here. I feel like
Democrats.
Yeah,
they're the ones coming out in mass to protest and stuff like that.
They're getting weaker and weaker as time goes by.
Yeah,
that's good.
I wouldn't call them insignificant, and frankly, I don't want them to be insignificant. If the Dems are thoroughly beaten, then the Republican Party will split, like it does in the major red states. Think of Oklahoma and places like that, between the sort of moderate Republicans and the far extreme Republicans. And I don't want to see that. I'd rather, under most cases, that the Republicans vote together. And by that, I mean Liberty Republicans and the sort of mainline Republicans. They vote together most of the time.
Yep.
And then the Democrats, sit out there going, "We hate free staters." Yeah. And people don't know what a free stater is.
Yeah. I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is that the Democrats have sort of, there's between the Republicans and the Libertarians, it's just so overwhelming by comparison to the Democrats, is I guess what I'm trying to say. So it's not, I would not say that Libertarians are in control or Republicans are in control or Democrats are in control. I would say it's more like between the Libertarians and the Republicans, the Democrats don't matter. I think is the way I would phrase it.
Currently, but I don't know if that's going to stay that way because people hate Trump so much and the Democrats are going to get a lot of people out to vote. So I wouldn't just be like, oh, they're not an issue. We don't need to worry about them. I don't think we should let our guard down.
Yeah, I don't think we should let our guard down either, but I think our strategy has been, hugely successful, independent of whether or not the Democrats are successful at getting people out to vote, basically. I think at the end of the day, a lot of our success is not really down to, anything that we've done other than gathering. Like, it's so weird because it's like it's not like you think about strategy and like, okay, you're doing certain things to achieve a certain objective, but the strategy is so simple. It's move enough people here and get enough people active, and people don't know who they're voting for, like, in the end. So like, you just have to throw enough candidates against a wall, basically, and you end up taking over. We have less than 1% of the we make up less than 1% of the population in New Hampshire, and yet we have 1/4 of the House. Like, obviously there's something wrong with democracy, right? Democracy does not work, and we're kind of taking advantage of the fact that democracy does not work.
And one thing about it is our people in the House, it's not my favorite activism, to be honest. The House and the inside politics. Exactly. It's not my favorite activism, and it's not even like the activism I would say is the best, most amazing use of every Free Stater's time.
Who's got the time for it?
But I do want to say that it helps people want to move, because people are a little myopic in this that don't live in New Hampshire. It's annoying, but sometimes they're like, you guys are still voting for, at the federal level, you guys are still voting for Obama and Biden and Kamala. And it's like, that is really stupid. I'm sorry. But at the same time, that is something people see. But at the same time, we can always point to, but look at the state house. It's a third Free Stater, and look at the stuff they push through.
I think the response...
It's kind of good for bringing people in.
Yeah, I think the response that we need to keep reiterating about the whole reason the Free State Project exists is that it doesn't... We don't... Most of the people who are in cages are caged at the state level. It's not the federal government. The federal government comes in with enormous amount of resources to go after individuals to make examples out of people. So yeah, it's worse to get prosecuted by the federal government generally. But at the end of the day, it's the state government where we actually have the ability to control it and influence it, and we can have the most impact, so to speak. And at the end of the day, we haven't been able to, come up with an island or, do something, that has been it just doesn't work, in the real world. But what does work in the real world is taking over a state and having a huge impact, even if it seems very far-fetched that New Hampshire will become an independent country. And look, I'm in total agreement. Even though I support NH exit, it's still a really
currently far-fetched
hard thing to, I don't know about far-fetched, but it's hard to see. It's hard to see right now. Even if it were to happen someday. But it doesn't even matter if it happens, because most of the harm that we're seeing is there because of state laws, not federal laws. Now, I would agree that as New Hampshire becomes more freedom focused and we get rid of a lot of the bad state laws, we will end up having to contend with the federal government. So that is certainly the federal government's a concern, but the most of the impact that we're going to end up having is going to be at a state level. So it does make a lot of sense to, focus on one single state, move, and then, go from there.
Yeah, I think that the real value, now I've been keeping my eye on all of these projects around the world that are sort of like move here and be more free. And what I'd say regarding them is it's true, but we need to understand what liberty means. There's two kind of competing definitions. One of them is you can do whatever you want so long as you don't harm other people and you don't directly aggress and you honor your word and things like that. Good stuff all. But there's another definition, and that definition is you can do anything you want on your private property. And if that includes a private city, you can do what you want in your private city. So long as everybody's free to leave, then it's a free place. And I like to use this example because it's ludicrous and fun. And, people really get the idea. If somebody wanted to create a bunch of dominatrixes got together and said, we want to create a city where all men must be on leash while outside the home. And they, all women must wear leather corsets, right? Now, is that libertarian?
Yes,
it is.
Absolutely.
If you can, if you're free to leave, if the man on a leash is like, one day he's like, I'm sick of this. And he takes his leash off. Well, he's got to go.
Yeah.
If he signed up for this, willingly, and he said, this is fine, but then he's got to get out.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, the aggressor there is actually the person who doesn't want to wear the leash, because it's
a funny situation.
Right, they're now violating the terms in which they're there, right? So yeah, it's kind of funny, but yeah.
Now, hold on, let me finish here.
Yeah, sorry.
So what we have in New Hampshire is a different situation. We have a statist model that is trying to be turned into a libertarian model. And I like to liken this as taking a tractor and trying to turn it into an airplane. It's not made for this. And but I mean, with enough work, you can do it. And I think that's what it really comes down to, is most libertarians, at least in the United States, are so frustrated. They're just so gosh darn angry that they want to get in and they want to do something. Many of these places that are free, and I think the best example at this point is Prospera at prospera.hn. There's no activism to be had. You go there and you're pretty free right off the bat. If there's some rules, it's international rules and treaty rules that sort of affect you. But they have rules as far as, building and those kind of things. You can't just build on somebody else's city without permission and those kind of things. So it's a funny thing when you think about it. And I think New Hampshire is just a perfect place for the vast majority of people willing to move are generally very sort of active and agitated, right? And that's a better place for them is New Hampshire, from what I've seen.
I think this is more of a, what works, not what's best situation. So even like I could see myself moving to Prosperous, right? But the problem is that you can't actually achieve that much more there than here. Just in the context of what I would like to see, achieve ultimately. Right. Right. And part of it's number. It comes down to numbers, right. In part too. Right. So like, we're not going to be able to fit, millions of people on Prosperous. It's just never going to happen. There's not enough land.
I think it might be set up for that, but again, it's as you said, there's no activism to be done. There's nothing. You're not going to change Prosperous.
Well, sure there is. There's plenty of activism that could be done. I mean, well, sort of. I mean, in the sense that Prosperous is not free. It's just
private.
Yeah, but it's like there's still, as you were saying, there's stuff you can't do.
But you don't want to fight the landlords, right?
No. What I'm saying is that, like you say, international law you have to abide by, for example, and there's all sorts of things in international law that we wouldn't agree with as libertarians.
Well, we should continue this conversation. More Free Talk Live coming up. 603-283-6160. We have people on the line, so hold on till the next segment. 603-283-6160. There's still room for you. More Free Talk Live is coming up.
Some of you have wanted to support Free Talk Live's mission on a monthly basis, but don't want to support Patreon. Now we have an alternative that also helps our premier streaming platform, Odyssey. Visit video.freetalklive.com and click Join at the top of the channel. You can subscribe for $5 per month, and unlike other subscription services, Odyssey adds their processing fee on top, so it'll cost a little over $5 per month, but Free Talk Live will receive the entire amount you pledged. Higher donation tiers are available if you're feeling so inspired. You'll get a special membership badge that's visible in the Odyssey chat room, and if we get enough supporters, we may enable members-only chat. This new subscription method is a great way to decentralize our direct listener support away from just Patreon and also support a libertarian-run business, Odyssey. Please visit video.freetalklive.com and click Join to subscribe to our Odyssey channel and help support spreading our message around the planet. Visit video.freetalklive.com and click Join today.
Are you tired of governments murdering people around the world? Stop using their money. There is an alternative. Bitcoin is a stateless, free market, non-political currency. Bitcoin cannot be inflated or controlled by any government. By using their money, you are helping the state. Stop doing it. You have an incredible alternative available now. Learn it, use it, spread it.
Get started with Bitcoin at bitcoin.com. That's bitcoin.com.
What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 2 is next, after the news, here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in New York, I'm Mitch McCann with the Week in Review. U.S. President Donald Trump says the U.S. military will remain in the Middle East to ensure that Iran opens the Strait of Hormuz. In a social media post, Mr. Trump detailed America's non-negotiables ahead of talks with Iran that are taking place in Pakistan. Nick Harper reports from Washington.
Donald Trump is making it clear that he wants what he wants and he's prepared to use the US military to get it. He says that all US ships, aircraft and military personnel with additional ammunition and weaponry will remain in place in and around Iran. That's until both sides reach what he's calling a real agreement. and he flags two sticking points, red lines for the US, that Iran must have no nuclear weapons and that the Strait of Hormuz must be open and safe. The US president sticking to those positions and making it clear he will not concede on those points. He said if those don't happen, then the shooting starts. More threats that are showing the cracks in diplomacy ahead of planned talks between the US and Iran in Pakistan. I'm Nick Harper in Washington.
European leaders voiced alarm this week over the situation in Lebanon and its impact on the fragile US-Iran truce. The Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez said Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's contempt for life and international law was intolerable. Ross Cullen reports.
The French Foreign Ministry said the strikes by the IDF were, quote, all the more unacceptable as they jeopardise the temporary ceasefire between the United States and Iran. The IDF said it was targeting Hezbollah sites in Lebanon, but Israeli forces reportedly detained a Spanish UN peacekeeper and fired warning shots at an Italian convoy. Madrid and Rome demanded answers from the Israeli government, with the Italian foreign minister warning of a second Gaza. EU officials also warned that high prices and potential shortages of jet fuel could last into the summer.
Meanwhile, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte said that member countries are doing everything US President Donald Trump had requested to strengthen the military alliance, even if some were initially a bit slow to provide support to America and its war with Iran. Kate Fisher reports from Washington.
The two men met at the White House on Wednesday amid tensions within the alliance over the Iran war. The US president has threatened to withdraw from the transatlantic security alliance in recent weeks. He argues that European allies haven't provided enough support for the US war in Iran while relying on US security guarantees. The NATO chief acknowledged that some allies were a bit slow to support the US. He noted they were also a bit surprised, given President Trump opted not to inform them before starting the war. But he argued that today allies are providing a massive amount of support, saying they've heard and are responding to President Trump's requests. On Thursday morning, Mr. Trump posted on social media that NATO was very disappointing.
The fertility rate in the US hit another record low last year. Fresh federal data shows that the number of births fell by 1% to just over 3.6 million. Tony Waterman has more.
The U.S. fertility rate has been in decline since 2007. Nearly 23% fewer babies are born now than then. Teenage pregnancies have seen the sharpest declines and are now sitting at record lows. The data shows that fertility rates among women in their 30s and 40s are actually increasing, but it's not enough to offset a slowdown among younger women. Experts say the high cost of childcare, housing, and a desire by women to have careers are among the many reasons why the fertility rate continues to fall. Tony Waterman, Washington.
And finally, Moscow announced a short-term Easter truce with Ukraine for the weekend. Kiev agreed to respond in kind if Russia indeed observes the proposed ceasefire. The Ukrainian leader also announced that preparations are underway for a new round of settlement talks with Russia, expected in the near future. Daria Bondarchuk has more from Moscow.
The two-day ceasefire announced by Russian President Vladimir Putin is scheduled to begin at 4 p.m. local time on Saturday, April 11, and would last until the end of Sunday, the 12th of April. Moscow said it has seen Kiev's statements that it's ready to support the truce and expects Ukraine to follow Russia's lead. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky promised to act accordingly in case Moscow too refrains from new strikes. He also said that preparations for a new round of settlement talks with Russia and the United States are underway. Negotiations could take place in the form of a trilateral meeting or a round of shuttle diplomacy, with Moscow and Kyiv talking to the American side separately. Daria Bondarchuk, Moscow.
From Feature Story News in New York, I'm Mitch McCann, and that was the Week in Review.
This is the Onion Week in Review. According to friends, colleagues, and complete strangers, anxiety-ridden man Timothy Gibbula is rightly ashamed of every single thing he does, with mere acquaintances saying they're constantly judging Gibbula at every moment, just as he suspects.
Tim's the kind of guy who's forever second-guessing his behavior, as if everyone's constantly scrutinizing him, and he's completely correct. We all are.
We can spend entire afternoons picking apart Tim's taste in clothing and his receding hairline. It's honestly all we do when he's not around.
Anytime he awkwardly says excuse me when he's he's waiting in line for milk or sugar, anytime he fails to make eye contact with me when he asks me for the Wi-Fi password. Not only do I notice these things, but I use them to judge him fundamentally as a human being.
A 3-alarm fire that tore through a family home in Newark, Delaware early Saturday morning tragically claimed a half sleeve of Oreo cookies that were trapped inside a cupboard. At the time of the blaze, the residence was occupied by Mike and Sheila Donlan, their 3 young children, and 6 delicious chocolate sandwich cookies, all half dozen of which perished in the intense heat and towering flames.
Got Telegram? You can follow our channel there and discuss show prep with other listeners at telegram.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
It's Free Talk Live, talk radio that you control, and 603-283-6160 is the phone number. That's 603-283-6160 to get in on the conversation with us tonight. And I'd like to thank one of our amplifiers. I'd like to thank Am I Free to Go for being an amplifier. That's great.
Yeah, that's totally.
For being an amplifier with us here at Free Talk Live. That means that Am I Free to Go went to amps.freetalklive.com and signed up to support the show. AMPS stands for Advertise, Market, Promote, and Support. Thanks to Am I Free to Go and everyone who supports us. Again, that's amps.freetalklive.com if you'd like to check out the perks and benefits of becoming an amplifier. And we really do appreciate all of the people who support us. And with you on Free Talk Live tonight, we've got me, Bonnie.
Mr. Penguin.
And Mark Edge.
And we do already have a caller on the line. I did want to say there's a person running for governor in New Hampshire really fast. And today he tweeted out, this is just an example of something that the Dems try to do to us every day, and it just backfires on them so hard. Today he tweeted out, it's John Kuiper running for governor as a Democrat. He said the Free State Project published their plan to take over New Hampshire in 2001. 25 years later, they have a stranglehold on state government. Ray Buckley has chaired the NH Democratic Party nearly the entire time. The problem isn't just the Free Staters, it's the leadership that allowed it to happen. And he got 11 likes on a 5K views post, and the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire replied, "Your children will suffer under the bondage of the Libertarians for generations. Get out while you can." and Way ratioed him. It's
so
really
wait, that
hard.
was like seven that liked his comment, and like 100 or 200 and something.
275 that liked LP Nation, so they ratioed him.
That's great.
It's great. It's wonderful.
Yeah,
I get one thing's for sure: Democrats aren't on Twitter, right?
Maybe that's what it is. So we have callers on the line. I'm going to go to the unscreened caller. You're on Free Talk Live. What's on your mind?
There's one.
Oh.
Libertarian 0. You hear that, Bonnie? Mark
No, I
said
actually
as
didn't
long as
understand what you
can
said.
read
What
it.
was the one in Libertarian 0?
Oh, Bears.
Bears. Oh.
Bears.
one. Oh, he's referencing Grafton, the Freetown Project.
Right. Objectively false, but okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, the Tracy Colburn incident, the first bear attack in the last 100 years or in the recent recorded history is just a made-up incident.
I don't know what you're talking about, honestly.
Well, I mean, look,
Obviously.
this is what
So
we got from the wildlife services here in New Hampshire. We're not making this stuff up. They told us. So, it's our job as semi-journalists to find out this information, and that's what was said. I don't know what happened in Grafton. I wasn't there in Grafton. I don't know if the donut lady existed or if she was a native New Hampshire native New Hampshireite. I
This
don't
says
know any
that
of these things.
Tracy Colburn died in 2021. The Grafton thing people talk about was like what way before that, like a decade before that. So you just don't know what you're talking about, Skeeter.
No, she didn't die. The Tracy Colburn incident, and she wasn't the donut lady either, Mark.
I don't know who she was.
It says that she died in 2021, and it's an obituary right here, but maybe you're talking about something else. She didn't die of the bear attack. You're saying, okay, all right.
I don't know. You just probably quickly Googled it.
Yes,
but
because
she
I told
was
you I
the
don't know
one
what you're
that
talking about.
referenced
It's
the
when you call in and talk about something, you should be able to describe what you're talking about instead of just like rambling and making a stupid voice.
Incident talked about in the book, right? It was a bear
I didn't read the
attack that
stupid
she
book because I
survived
already know that it's full of lies because
Obviously
they
you
say
didn't read the
things
book.
that
You
the
could've
fish
said
and
you
game
read the
expert.
book.
Okay, yeah, I'm not talking to you. You don't talk over me. It's stupid. Turd Ferguson from Pennsylvania. You're on Free Talk Live. What's on your mind?
Well, just for one, I'm not one of the trolls in the Matrix, so I hope you weren't referring to me on that.
Oh, sure.
Just be
Don't
clear.
they troll you?
Yeah, they troll me. I'm on the victim end of this. I'm innocent in this. By the way, what's going on with this Matrix server? I need to get back in there. I need to get my fix. You know what I'm saying?
I don't know. I'm sorry. I guess we don't have
Why is
anybody who
everybody
wants
staring at me?
answers. Yeah, sorry.
We don't have the answer yet. We have a temporary Matrix server that we're using for certain rooms that have been created. But the main Matrix server that we've got is currently down and hopefully going to be resurrected soon.
Yeah, I'm out here in the cold too. I don't know what's going on with the Matrix server.
Basically, it got too popular is what the story is the summary of it. And it finally
ran out of space or something.
Ran out of resources, and we just couldn't keep it running. It's got to. We could bring it back up. The problem is that if we bring it back up and we don't do what needs to be done, it's just going to go down in another 5 years. So if we do it right, then we can expand it as it.
And we can't do what's it called, a Discord, because they've banned us.
Yeah. Right. Which is the whole reason that we have Matrix, right? And unfortunately, so Matrix. All right, let me tell you the story. So Matrix was originally set up by who is set up by a prior individual. Let's put it that way. And he died, and he didn't quite set it up the way it really needed to be set up in order to sustain large numbers of users. And it's kind of hard to do and maintain a Matrix server, is kind of the gist of it too. So like combine a bunch of different factors, and it's actually shocking that we've been able to keep it up for, more than 5 years. Yeah, it can scale. It doesn't scale well. It doesn't. It's a resource hog is what it is. I don't want to say it doesn't scale well. It can scale to millions of users. But it's a challenge with limited resources and a bunch of other things. It's a challenge to run is the gist of it. And that's why it's not something exclusive to us. It's like universally true, but it's also one of the very few solutions that actually somewhat works. So no matter how much we hate it, it's kind of the way to go. And that's why we need to continue with it and get it back up.
Okay. So basically what you're saying is next week it's going to be functional. That's basically
yeah, let's hope so.
Did you have anything else you want to talk about today, Turd?
Well, yeah. So the reason why I'm calling is because free staters, I do believe, are generally annoying. I'll
agree with that.
I do.
No, I can agree with that. I said.
Oh, I thought you said you don't.
No, I can agree with that. I mean, there's a lot of annoying people here amongst the free staters.
I wouldn't say generally annoying, meaning like majority annoying.
Yeah, you know what? I wouldn't say the majority are annoying, but I would say there's definitely some autistic people.
If you're an annoying person, people are going to be annoying to you, right? Like this is kind of one of those mirror image things, right, Turd?
Yeah, but the question is, how are people who are not libertarian more annoying than the people within our community? I would say, yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'm not a libertarian, and I'm the least annoying person of all time. But
you moved for the Free State Project, right?
I thought he was a libertarian. I thought
I moved and then I left because the people there are annoying. And
I think it was just your lack of ability to make friends. That's probably all it is.
Well, maybe that's true, but regardless, I moved to Shrewsbury, which is far nicer, and I've been here for at this point longer than I was living in New Hampshire. And I should say, I had a very beautiful, lovely Free Stater come spend the weekend with me maybe a couple weeks ago now. And even she agrees that Shrewsbury is significantly nicer than
a Free Stater.
What do you mean by nicer? Like warmer weather, or like?
well, warmer weather is only the one of the many things. I mean,
it's pretty on par. When I went, I was only an hour north of Shrewsbury last month.
I don't even understand that.
Where's Shrewsbury?
Pennsylvania. Exactly where Shrewsbury. I wouldn't know without.
I don't know where that is either. But my thought on this is that nicer is defined by how much freedom we have and how many other like-minded people there are. So there isn't a nicer place than New Hampshire, right? Like And if that's not your objective, though, I can understand that. It just seems kind of weird to say that some other place is nicer within the context of.
Yeah, you got to at least define it. So go ahead and define it.
So what do you mean by nicer?
Well, nicer can be a combination of multiple things, and it's sort of like how I buy things, right? It's the price to the value ratio. You know what I mean? And if there's an area that's close to the amount of freedom that you'll have in New Hampshire, but also is prettier, and it has warmer weather, and there's a more community-oriented feel.
Okay, so I get it. So you don't understand the concept of the Free State Project is what the problem is. So the whole point of the Free State Project was to get enough people in one area that could change things. That doesn't mean New Hampshire was better currently. It means it will be better down the road with enough people coming.
Maybe.
So
maybe, and we've had this conversation before. Look, if New Hampshire generally. If you get enough of your friends in the Senate to vote out the government and vote themselves out of jobs, which is great. But if you can do that, I might consider moving back there. But until then, I think.
I don't think I'm going to aim my political goals as to whether or not Turd Ferguson moves back to New Hampshire. But what I would say is that if you have a criteria that you would like to see done before you move to New Hampshire, don't expect it to happen. The goal that I had when I moved here 20 years ago was I wanted to see government schools eviscerated, because I really believe that they're the indoctrination centers that sort of upon the foundation upon which the cathedral that calls itself the state is built. And that's in the works. It's taken 25 years. And if you're like, it's boring, I don't know what to do for you.
There's no anybody who has this impression that like we're going to somehow magically get rid of the government schools overnight is like, that's just the most delusional thing I think I could possibly conceive. Well, I certainly think that we can maybe get there at some point, but like you're talking about like maybe not a whole generation, but we're talking about like almost a whole generation type of situation here going on. I mean, this isn't something that's going to happen in 25 years. We're probably talking, 35, 45 years.
That's 3 generations. 45 years, first of all, is 3 generations. And look.
Okay, so I'm thinking about a whole human lifetime, more or less, not a generation, whatever, however you want to define it.
Well, and here's the other thing: the schools. I mean, of 25 years of hard work, the government schools are still functional in New Hampshire. And I think the Keene, if I'm not mistaken, the Keene school budget is higher than it's ever been, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't think the Keene should be the yardstick that you use to see the success of the Free State Project.
You're probably,
and I also would expect to see some problems before they get better. Yeah, that's kind of one of the things. I mean, thanks Skeeter, we have this great idea about making things worse before they get better. As people extract their kids out of the government school system, the cost per student is continue to stay the same because the air conditioning has to stay on in that same building. The same amount of teachers will exist there, but if there's 33% of the students are gone, then expect the prices to rise per student.
Well, inflation rises too. It's like you're just comparing number to number. It's not really. I
mean, at some point, those prices could fall too if enough students leave, they can start closing schools and things like that, and then you end up with less air conditioning, right? And the cost per student could go down too eventually. But no, you're right. This is definitely not something that's going to happen overnight. It's going to be something that's going to take a long time. That's like a huge thing to accomplish.
Yeah.
In the short term, you can accomplish little things.
Yeah. What other state has EFAs, education freedom accounts? I know it's not like every libertarian's cup of tea, like the number one best solution, but it's better than most other states.
I agree. It's better, but it's certainly a terrible thing. I think the freedom
I don't think it's a terrible thing.
I think it's a terrible thing in the sense that we're sort of kind of getting on board with a little bit of socialism. I mean, in some sense, you could think of it as a refund of your tax dollars too.
It's changing nothing except putting the money in a different direction, and you get to choose where it goes. Right. And it's nobody is saying this is like the solution we want, and this is great. No. It's just the fact that you can't go from 0 to 100.
Yeah, and I agree. I think there's probably better examples of things we've been able to achieve.
Well, I'm just saying because he brought up school specifically.
Right.
It's like now you can choose to send that money that you are forced to pay to public schools to a private school where you send your kids.
I think some better examps are things like we got rid of the knife laws in New Hampshire. We ended up with what was it? Not open carry we already had, I think, but was it? What's the other one?
Constitutional carry.
Constitutional carry. We got constitutional carry. Like, I mean, there are definitely things you can point to and say, hey, look, we're the reason for this, right? But at the same time, it's like the big things like getting rid of government schools. Like, you have to understand, we make up less than 1% of the population in New Hampshire. We're not going to achieve big things like that until, you know, we have some serious increases in numbers and actually dominate in the House and the Senate and the governor too. Remember, we can't just dominate in the House or the Senate. We have to dominate all three different positions, basically, or both different houses, and House, the Senate, and the governor, in other words.
Well, look, that's the point that I'm trying to make. The purpose of the Free State Project was to finish all these things. I'm not saying there was a finite date on the agreement that the Free Staters signed, but the purpose of the Free State Project was to move 20,000 libertarians to New Hampshire to eventually vote out the government through its use its own means.
And you're just defining it yourself, because the literal thing says to move 20,000 in order to exert the fullest extent of their ability to cause a free society, not, we're going to move 20,000 people to vote out the blah, 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 XYZ, and now you're just adding things yourself. Like, you're adding things that are just honestly, you're twisting words, but you're putting these like parameters in that no one ever said, we're going to have this done by 2025 or whatever, what I'm saying? I just explicitly said, I know there's no date, but to its okay, well, it doesn't even matter what date, you're also just adding in things. It's like no one said, we will have a libertarian governor and that's our goal. Like, nobody ever said that. It's like to exert your fullest effort towards a libertarian society, and that's what people do when they get here. And it's like, sorry, things take time.
And what's the fullest effort? To vote out the government.
That's not the fullest effort in everybody's ability and everybody's.
That's definitely not the fullest. I mean, so you're saying
if
the
you
fullest
think that they're going to vote out the government in the next 20 years, I've got news for you. Stay in Shrewsbury.
Yeah, right.
Right. It's just not going to. I mean, like, you can't just move a couple thousand people to the state of New Hampshire or any state for that matter, and they're just going to vote the government away. That's not even on the ballot. Voting the government away isn't on the ballot.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Well, we do have other things to talk about tonight other than just the Free State Project in New Hampshire. We were at the very beginning of the show talking about how the United States is basically nationalizing routers. Is that not a good way to put it? Because basically they're going to tell us...
Yeah, kind of, I think, actually.
We don't like other countries owning these routers because there are objectively security risks, but there are with every router. But anyways, so they're going to say we all have to get rid of our routers. They're saying we have to reset our routers now and just not have internet until they make American-made routers. That's what I heard from a Free Stater.
So
but we should read the article.
So that's not quite. That's a little bit off, but it's. I think the nationalization point is kind of yes, in the sense that they're trying to migrate the production to the United States. But it's also, there's also another angle on this, sort of that predates this actually. So back in, I don't know what it was, maybe a decade ago or so. No, maybe not even a decade. Maybe it was like, I don't know, 5 years ago, something like that. Maybe probably a little bit longer, 5 to 10 years ago, somewhere in that range. The FCC actually banned your ability to control your own router. And it's not even just applicable to routers. It's pretty much applicable to anything, I think, with a modern Wi-Fi chip in it, basically. And basically what they said was you can't release the source code. Now they're going to come back and say, well, we didn't really say that. Of course they actually did say that outright in one of their documents. But anyway, let's not get into the details here, into the weeds. The point is that they basically made it such that all modern routers are basically locked down in one way or another. And so there's bits of your router that none of us have any control over. And what I mean by that is, so most of us don't actually necessarily like have the technical skills to like see what our routers are doing, at a low level, like source code and things like that. However, we do have the ability to buy products, that are not doing things that are malicious to the degree that they're not locked down or the government doesn't mandate lockdown. So, for example, my company puts out a couple different router products, and they're not locked down, and there is a complete set of source code, and so we can do things that no other manufacturer would. However, if the FCC comes back and says you can't you can't have a free software Wi-Fi stack, well, then we can't get the source code for the Wi-Fi stack, which means we can't, root out any malicious components that an upstream company, what's called a chipset manufacturer, puts in that the source code that supports that component in the router. And so what we have right now is actually a very dangerous situation, way more dangerous than where the router is manufactured. None of the modern routers that are coming out by any of the major manufacturers, they could all be backdoored for all we know. We have no idea what's going on at a low level. The only ones that we have any idea about are the ones that my company. So my company is Think Penguin, and thinkpenguin.com. Anyway, the point is, outside of these couple of routers that my company sells, we don't know. Like technically, like the security vulnerabilities that have been exploited have been not a backdoor,
Chris. What
but
about
there are
VPN?
routers that we know about that have backdoors, and multiple backdoors in many cases that are government.
What about VPNs, Chris? I mean, doesn't that kind of solve this problem?
No, because you can't. I mean, so the VPN will prevent your ISP potentially from seeing the traffic that goes over your internet connection. Mm-hmm. That is true. But if the router itself is backdoored, or it can be exploited, then the VPN becomes ineffective. And so that's the danger here, basically. The government through the FCC has been slowly adding all these restrictions that actually make us less safe. And this particular move to force everything into the United States is actually making the situation even worse. Because, for example, we're no longer able to use chips in Wi-Fi routers that we actually have control over, and it's both because of the FCC's prior rule changes as well as this new rule change. Basically, we can't use. Let's say there's a US SoC that's being produced that we could potentially use, and there's a Chinese SoC that's being produced that we could potentially build a router.
What's an SoC?
SoC stands for system on a chip. Okay, it's basically
system on a chip.
System on a chip. It's like a little computer, but it's got a bunch of different pieces built into it, right? So it might have the Wi-Fi component integrated as opposed to being separate chips on a router. Okay, so if we only have, let's say we have two chipsets to pick from. One of them is a Chinese-made chip, and one of them is a US-based chip. If the US manufacturers, the companies that design the SoC, don't release the source code, we don't have any control over it. If the Chinese manufacturers, on their hand, do release the source code, but we can't use those chips because everything has to be sourced from within the United States, well, then the only thing you're going to be able to buy in the United States are routers that are backdoored by the US government. And we already have that problem with computers. So we're basically just extending this to routers now.
Haven't routers been backdoored by the U.S. government for a couple of decades? And isn't it obvious that the Chinese government probably has infiltrated our, whatever systems we have for these backdoors, and the backdoors were created by the U.S. government?
So it's actually a combination of different governments that have backdoored routers. So there's routers that have it's not all routers necessarily universally, but there are at least some routers that we can point to that say, hey, we have two different backdoors that we can point to from two different governments here. We may not know what governments they were that backdoored them, but they're two different separate backdoors.
Doesn't that mean it's over? Like they've got everything we do on our computers?
Yeah. I mean, that's the danger here.
Well, more Free Talk Live coming up, 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160.
This hour of Free Talk Live is brought to you by Dash Digital Cash. Dash is the cryptocurrency designed to be used for spending. Rising fees have made Bitcoin useless for purchases, but Dash continues to have fees less than 1 cent per transaction, and its features ensure Dash is undefeated as the most useful cryptocurrency in the marketplace. From a technical standpoint, Dash transactions are irreversible, and its network is protected from 51% attacks by their Chainlocks technology. There's no need to wait for a confirmation before considering a Dash transaction complete, so it's great for merchants.
Dash is one of the oldest cryptocurrencies and is widely available on exchanges, including the decentralized Maya protocol, and in multi-crypto wallets. It's easy to get and use Dash. Start by learning more at Dash.org. Big thanks to the Dash DAO for sending us 32 Dash per month to promote Dash on the air. Visit Dash.org to learn about Dash. Dash.org.
From Feature Story News in New York, I'm Mitch McCann with the Week in Review. US President Donald Trump says the US military will remain in the Middle East to ensure that Iran opens the Strait of Hormuz. In a social media post, Mr. Trump detailed America's non-negotiables ahead of talks with Iran. Nick Harper reports from Washington.
Donald Trump is making it clear that he wants what he wants and he's prepared to use the US military to get it. He says that all US ships, aircraft and military personnel with additional ammunition and weaponry will remain in place in and around Iran. That's until both sides reach what he's calling a real agreement. And he flags two sticking points, red lines for the US, that Iran must have no nuclear weapons and that the Strait of Hormuz must be open and safe. The US president sticking to those positions and making it clear he will not concede on those points. He said if those don't happen, then the shooting starts. More threats that are showing the cracks in diplomacy ahead of planned talks between the US and Iran in Pakistan. I'm Nick Harper in Washington.
European leaders voiced alarm this week over the situation in Lebanon and its impact on the fragile US-Iran truce. The Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez said Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's contempt for life and international law was intolerable. Ross Cullen reports.
The French Foreign Ministry said the strikes by the IDF were, quote, all the more unacceptable as they jeopardise the temporary ceasefire between the United States and Iran. The IDF said it was targeting Hezbollah sites in Lebanon, but Israeli forces reportedly detained a Spanish UN peacekeeper and fired warning shots at an Italian convoy. Madrid and Rome demanded answers from the Israeli government, with the Italian foreign minister warning of a second Gaza. EU officials also warned that high prices and potential shortages of jet fuel could last into the summer.
Meanwhile, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte said that member countries are doing everything US President Donald Trump had requested to strengthen the military alliance, even if some were initially a bit slow to provide support to America and its war with Iran. Kate Fisher reports from Washington.
The two men met at the White House on Wednesday amid tensions within the alliance over the Iran war. The US president has threatened to withdraw from the transatlantic security alliance in recent weeks. He argues that European allies haven't provided enough support for the US war in Iran while relying on US security guarantees. The NATO chief acknowledged that some allies were a bit slow to support the US. He noted they were also a bit surprised, given President Trump opted not to inform them before starting the war. But he argued that today allies are providing a massive amount of support, saying they've heard and are responding to President Trump's requests.
From Feature Story News in New York, I'm Mitch McCann, and that was the Week in Review.
Our Matrix server is about as free as internet chat can be. Join the existing rooms or create your own at chat.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live, talk radio that you control, and that means that you can call 603-283-6160 to get in on the conversation with us. 603-283-6160. We have some calls on the line, but we still have room for you. And Free Talk Live is brought to you by LibertyMinded.com. Official Free Talk Live gear like t-shirts and hoodies are available at LibertyMinded.com. Plus, you'll find a unique collection of cool and funny Liberty-oriented clothing at LibertyMinded.com. That's LibertyMinded.com. And with you on Free Talk Live tonight, you've got me, Bonnie,
Mr. Penguin,
and Mark Edge.
And we have two good callers on the line, so let's go to the phones. We have Paul in Arizona. You're on Free Talk Live. What's on your mind?
Hey, Bonnie. Good to talk to you, Mr. Penguin. And hey, it's great to talk to you, Mark.
Good to talk to you guys too, or to you too.
Yeah, it's security is always an issue, and I appreciate having somebody who knows what they're talking about having to do with this router issue.
I'm glad you can understand, Chris.
Sorry, guys. I know it's a technical, complicated issue.
I have a feeling that somebody knows what you're saying and that it's important.
It is. There's probably a lot of people who understand what I'm saying is important, but as far as the listener base goes, it's hard to tell what percentage.
I could tell that what you're saying basically means that it's over for us.
Yeah, we're screwed.
Is anybody familiar with Leo Laporte's radio podcast network with Steve Gibson?
Are you, Mark?
Yeah, I've heard Leo Laporte's show. Maybe it's been a long time.
Yeah. What about it? I know the name, but I don't really know too much about it either.
Well, Steve Gibson has a weekly podcast on computer security, and he talks about all of this stuff. And I think it's good to keep. He's a good source of information to stay on top of these issues.
Steve Gibson.
I mean, my issue with most of these, a lot of these people, is they don't really know what they're talking about. At some level,
I think Leo Laporte does.
I don't know.
I say anything about Mr. Gibson.
I don't know specifically about Leo Laporte, but there's people who have good intent. I think out there that are speaking on a lot of these issues, but I also think that they sort of gloss over a lot of stuff that they don't really understand.
It looks like his is called Security Now, and it's hosted by Steve Gibson and Leo Laporte. So before we dismiss it,
Steve Gibson writes his own software in assembler. He goes way back. He was the first one to come out with a software called SpinRite back in the days when they were still using MSM drives. And this guy knows what he's talking about.
Have you heard of SpinRite?
Is this the Microsoft guy?
No.
He worked at Microsoft at one point?
He talks about Microsoft. Sometimes he says nice things about them when they do good things, and sometimes he rips them a new one when they screw up.
Okay. Yeah. I can't off the top of my head at the moment, I can't think of specifically who we're talking about. So I can't, be too critical or anything. Yeah.
Well, I recommend that you and the listeners check him out, and you can decide for yourself whether he knows what he's talking about. But all of his podcasts are in the archive, and you can listen to everything and catch up and pick and choose subjects. And I think he's one of the good resources for security.
Excellent. So that's Security Now podcast. Anything else for us, Paul?
Well, I just want to give props to Mr. Penguin for keeping products available for the public that are not security liabilities.
At thinkpenguin.com.
Yeah. That's been the focus of the business, has been privacy, security, freedom, basically since 2008 actually. So that's the entire focus basically. So it's all Linux and free software, nice. And so on. So if you know anything about security, you can't really begin to talk about security until after you have a complete set of source code, and that's sort of the core thing that we do. It's not just Linux. There's a lot of people who out there. Linux is often written on boxes. When you go to buy a product, right? It says Linux is supported. Well, a lot of times it's not properly supported, and there's security issues with it, just like there's always a security issue with Windows, right? So you got to be careful with what you buy, and what we do is we kind of filter out the crap. Oh, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that, but
you can say that, yeah.
Yeah, we filter out the garbage.
You can use the C word.
Yeah. So to make it easier for people to get stuff that just works and is less of a security liability or privacy liability for that matter, as opposed to.
Yep.
And speaking of backdoors, that takes us back to Microsoft.
Oh geez, yeah. It's Microsoft is literally scanning your system for stuff they don't like and then reporting you to the government. I mean, and Apple's doing the same thing. It's just absolutely mind-boggling, what people put up with, or even they don't even know, right?
Well, one of the problems I had was when I did Linux some years ago. It's been at least 10 years. It didn't feel ready for prime time. There was, proprietary software I couldn't use on it, and it was a little buggy and weird, and it would act funny sometimes, and it just didn't. It was frustrating.
So I am curious, what did you use exactly? Because you're as I've what's his name?
Richie Rich.
No. He's got a radio show in Arizona. Who am I thinking of, guys?
Ernest Hancock.
Ernest Hancock.
I knew who you're talking about too, but couldn't think of his name.
So as Ernest Hancock once confirmed, the easy button, there's what you're running into is that I'm pretty sure, you could tell me if I'm wrong here, but you probably had a system that somebody threw Linux on. It wasn't designed to work with it. It didn't work the way it was quite work the way it was supposed to. And then you also had software that you were used to using that didn't run on it. Well, a lot has changed in the last decade.
Ian has created I think it's Kubuntu. Linux
Kubuntu,
on my computer, and it feels like just using a regular Microsoft Windows.
And funny enough, Kubuntu is harder to use.
Really?
Yeah, Kubuntu is harder to use and more buggy than something like Cinnamon. So
okay,
and that's the thing. And
that was a few years ago.
Right, and I bet you're using it on a system that wasn't designed to run free software, meaning it's gonna still have
cannot confirm or deny
little issues. So, and Mark, I will have to ask you. You didn't have a system from Think Penguin, right?
Oh, of course not.
Yeah,
this was like an old laptop.
Yeah, so here's the problem. This is exactly what I'm talking about, and this is the whole reason that Think Penguin. This is why I started Think Penguin, was because of these problems. It's like it needs to be easy to use. And if it's not easy to use, and then how do you gain the security and the freedom and all that? Right? You don't,
because you will end up not using it.
Yeah, you're just going to revert back. And this is the other thing I've always said to people: you don't put somebody on Linux and on some random Linux system, because if you do and it doesn't work for them, they're never going to try it again. And it's never going to, they're never going to go back and try again, because they're going to blame Linux, and Linux isn't the problem. The Linux is, poor choices. And one of those poor choices was you ended up with hardware that basically was bad, was garbage. And you would have had the same types of problems if you'd upgrade to a new version of Windows, but nobody ever upgrades Windows. So they don't even know it. But anyway.
Well, thank you for the call, Paul from Arizona. We have other people online, so I'm going to go to Reverend Ratspeed in Nevada. You're on Free Talk Live. What's on your mind?
Hello, Bonnie. Hello, everyone. Hello, Mark. Hello, Mr. Penguin. How's everyone?
Good. How are you tonight?
Good, Ratspeed.
I'm doing well. Of course, whenever there's a tech discussion going on, my ears perk up and I start listening in. So this is kind of nice. So as far as routers and FTC regulations I have not been in the loop lately. So, and by the way, I want to preface, I am with Linux for the last, since 2017, 18. So
okay.
Just real quick before I get into my question, I do want to say, yes, when you first get into Linux, especially after me having gotten, how should I put complacent with Windows 7 having worked for so long. The moment that they said that they were going to announce end of life for Windows 7, I'm like, okay, that's it. I'm never going to go to 10, so obviously I have to jump into the dinghy and wait around for a while until someone picks me up. And it was a bit of a chore at first. So I did kind of get the tail end of the transition of what I would call like the earlier Linux experience from what Mark was talking about 10 years ago to what it is today. And it's kind of interesting, just as a side note, that if you're looking for something that's easier to use, great. However, there's a new danger that's coming up, is that even Linux is now under fire from various different regulations that are springing up that are completely unconstitutional, but of course haven't been tested in their entirety, such as the age verification or attestation situation.
Yeah.
And you guys can talk about that, or you maybe already have.
Yeah, we have not talked about this, but this is definitely an interesting topic to talk about. Yeah.
This whole thing that states are trying to do where you have to verify your age before going on Facebook and such?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have an article we would have gotten into tonight if we didn't have any calls, and it's
Sorry.
No, I would way rather have calls. I didn't mean to say it any other way.
Here, guys.
It says the timeless fear. It's called the timeless fear of corrupting the youth, and it's like they always try to use the excuse that, we're protecting the youth, when they are trying to bring more horrible laws to control us all. So that's basically...
Yeah, well, so what you're referencing is all of the basically developers that are willing to go along to get along, right? In terms of implementing this age verification or age attestation crap.
Yeah, and I want to mention that, Bonnie, it's not necessarily at the platform level when you go to a website. That's actually So Meta, in other words, Mark Zuckerberg's company, has actually been pushing and lobbying for these age verification laws at the operating system level, so that way they can kind of wash their hands of the situation. If it's handled at the computer level, then all they have to do is just ping for a signal from a computer that attests, okay, what age is this person? And so, in other words, it's done at the user account level, and that gets into a really murky territory, especially when it comes to free and open source software, because if anyone in the world can change the code and then build it from there, they don't have to comply. But what the danger down the line, which a lot of people aren't really talking about yet, which I kind of foresee is, well, if your software requires that signal to come from the computer, then they can deny you access, saying, sorry, you haven't verified your age on your computer yet, so we're not going to allow you to go to this website. I kind of see that problem happening down the line.
Yeah, it's the dumbing down. It's treating everybody as kids, as little kids, if they don't comply.
Yeah. I mean, I came from the internet like 25, 30 years ago almost, where like if you were young and you were online, you had to grow up pretty darn quick, because the internet was a free place. It's, the Wild West is, the analogy that people use all the time. And now it's kind of turned into, well, since we have found ways to make money, and since our living depends on these systems that we've created, now we can be controlled by government to tell us how we need to run the internet, which is how age verification and this router problem, which this is the reason why I was calling, that's how it affects us. In other words, kind of like they're trying to turn the tables on us and say, well, the internet isn't yours anymore, it's ours, and we're going to tell you how to use it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a big danger.
Yeah, it's a lot of fear mongering that they're
that too.
using, and it's like we've had the internet for, 35. Close to 35 years, something like that now. Actually, it might be exactly 35 years, or at least the commercial internet, right?
Right.
And in 35 years, we've had how many generations of kids, grow up with the internet, and we've turned out fine. Like it's like, why are we trying to do this now? And it's like, it's not just affecting, like, people think, oh, it's just affecting, kids, like, who cares, right? But it doesn't. It affects adults too. And I think that's kind of the thing that people are sort of overlooking. And it also, it's also the sort of the first steps towards sort of a total totalitarian state. Oh, I got it. Totalitarian state, but on your computing, right? Like the ability of the government to dictate, all sorts of things. It's not just this one thing. If they can do this one thing, they can also there's all sorts of things they can start banning and doing and restricting and mandating. And it's kind of scary, really. And they've got, with things like Secure Boot and, some of these other things that have taken
2.0.
Yeah, they've taken a decade, to implement. But as time goes on, it's getting more and more to a point where we don't have any control over anything anymore. And this is already enabling governments, particularly China and Russia and elsewhere. But the United States is right behind them. It's like this idea that, we don't have to worry about it just because it's Russia or it's China. Right? Europe, for example, already, like, people think about China as the Great Firewall of China, right? And everything's locked down, and you can't say what you want, basically. But that's how Europe is now too. You've got the same situation in Europe, and I think Americans don't even realize it. People in Europe can't even visit U.S. news websites. That's how bad it is. And at least many of them.
Wow.
Some of them they might be able to access, but many of them they can't.
I think there's a difference between the Great Wall of China and what's happening here, because even in the Great Wall of China, they're not trying to force them to change, for instance, their chipset to be locked down. And that was my question I had for you. I'm afraid to change the subject because this is actually very, this is more important than just asking a technical question about a chipset. But yeah, I really think that the jurisprudence and the philosophy behind the law is more important to talk about rather than all of these technical little details, because that's really what it comes down to. If someone is being forced to change their hardware to fit a law that goes against the principles of Magna Carta and everything that's followed since, then that's completely, it should be unacceptable. And we can't let those little technical details like, oh, with this particular chip and this particular firmware and it all comes down to whether or not we're free or not. So in regards to the Great Wall of China, they basically set up a big firewall to kind of separate the internet. I don't know what they're doing. Because you have to look at, that's where the chips are made. And I think partially this is where we got into this situation, is that since we're tethered, since we have this umbilical cord of supply chain coming from the Far East there, we have so much vulnerability. I'm not talking about the way that Trump is talking about their vulnerabilities for national security. I'm talking about as individuals, as quote unquote users. We have a vulnerability that we're facing because we're completely dependent on that. If you, I don't know, Mr. Penguin, if you ever watch Gamers Nexus, but they did a wonderful documentary about the black market of NVIDIA chipsets that are being sold within China. And I likened it to the same sense of, well, if you are trying to outlaw a particular color of tomato or apple or something, and you're trying to tell an agrarian, grassroots-built society that has nothing but farmland, and they're sitting on a sack of seeds, you're going to have a hell of a time trying to tell them, well, we can't make this particular tomato. In this case, with the chipsets, they're making the chipsets in a factory, but they can't export them, meaning cart them out the door on a dolly and start selling them to their local market. You have to look at their markets, especially in Shenzhen and the surrounding areas there. It's like going to a farmer's market. You have literal bins and bins of surplus chips, just the same way that the Americans used to have in the late 70s, early 80s, when you used to have electronic surplus stores, which are basically, it was that situation, the same type of situation that Steve Wozniak used to his advantage to be able to develop the Apple I.
Yeah.
It was that open source ground. The word open source is a funny word, really. Everyone argues about that. But basically what it means is you are the farmer. You are connected to your supply chain. And when you get that close to it, there's nothing that you can do, nothing that any government can do, where it's as superfluous as breathing air. It's like you are literally surrounded by your crop, and you have the ability. And this so-called black market, set of chips that the Trump administration decided to ban from sale to the Chinese market, they're everywhere. It's everywhere because it's mom and pop shops. You got a little shop that has a bunch of NVIDIA cards. Oh yeah, they got 5090s, they got 4090s. It's all over the place. Can I ask the question, Mr. Penguin, about the chipset being locked down on the router? Because I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to get to that question.
What's the question?
Are you saying that we're not allowed to flash the firmware with open source software now, like the way that the WRT routers from Linksys used to be?
Yes.
Is that what I'm hearing?
Okay, so it's kind of complicated, but I'll try and not be too complicated about my answer.
Okay. Oh, that's fine.
Okay, so parts of the router have to be locked down, basically, under the FCC rules. And their logic was you can cause interference on 5 gigahertz specifically. And 5 gigahertz, like sometimes you can use a certain part of the 5 gigahertz frequency, but sometimes you can't. And basically, because if you have a complete set of source code, you can manipulate that to do things that's not the FCC doesn't allow. Basically, the problem is that you can also do it using just switching out your antenna can also cause interference on routers. Right.
Yeah. I can understand the transmission interference because they're always having issues. Like, for instance, like I used to have a neighbor that had a pirate low band frequency radio station, and whenever he was online, it would interfere with all of my radios because I was like literally living across the alley from him. So I can understand that.
Sure.
But are you saying that their solution to this, the different company solution, is just to lock down the firmware completely because it allows you to change the transmission?
Yeah, it's complicated. So it's a combination of, I guess, sort of two things. So one, the sources are not available for newer Wi-Fi chips. that are used in the routers. So you might be able to throw Linux on it, but that there's a proprietary component in there that we have no idea what it's doing, that the Wi-Fi is dependent on in order for that router to work. The other problem is the law effectively makes it so that companies will not release the complete set of source code for these newer routers, basically.
Instead of going into a huge amount of details, perhaps maybe you might want to give a link to like something on your website that talks about this, where people can read into it more, and like, for instance, like find out. I'm tempted to ask, like, are you talking about the firmware for the main chip for the entire control console that you can access to basically put a new operating system on your router, or are you saying that they told you to put a chip in between that chip and then the other chip that prevents any? Yeah, so I'm scared to ask more questions.
To clarify it, the FCC does not specify how you have to lock your router down, but you have to lock the router down such that it cannot basically. You can't do certain things on the 5 gigahertz frequency. Basically, it's something to that effect. So, and the outcome, the result of that is that the only way to do that is to lock the router down. Basically,
I accidentally hung up on Rat Speed, but I think that you answered his last question. I meant to just like pause his call. Sorry about that. But we have another call on the line. So Sarah in New Mexico, you're on Free Talk Live. What's on your mind? And thank you, Reverend Rat Speed, for the call.
Wow, but he's a high-tech reverend.
Yeah.
Yes, am I on?
Yep.
Oh, yeah, I went to church today, and then we live by that really dangerous intersection, and I said, a bunch of high school kids from Del Norte got hit by cars going to school. I talked to them when they were going to school, and nobody does nothing about it. It's quite perplexing why this is. Why the school don't do nothing.
What do you expect them to do about it?
Isn't there anything more than just our cars just running the red light all the time, and because they're speeding and they just turn up right with the people in the crosswalk and hit them and keep on going? I mean,
presumably there's police out there, right? I mean, I don't know what to tell you.
I think the answer to this problem is to teach kids to look both ways before they cross the street.
Yeah, I wanted to know how bad it's been, so I googled bunch of high school kids in Del Norte, New Mexico get hit by cars, and it says recent incidents in 2025 is the most recent one. 2 teenagers died after being ejected from a vehicle that hit a light pole, so that's not people walking. And then 2022. A homecoming party resulted in a crash that killed some kids, one high school student. And then 2024, 2 Espanola Valley high school students were in a crash. See, like, I'm not seeing anything about people getting hit by cars constantly. I'm not saying it's not true necessarily, but it's not easy to find out, like, to see, tons of them getting hit by cars. I just don't know that that's true. Thank you for the call, Sarah. And, more Free Talk Live coming up, 603-283-6160. There's still time for you to get a call in. More coming up.
Is your child defiant, independent, annoyingly inquisitive? After a long, hard day of following the rules, who wants to deal with troublesome kids? 49% of children suffer from oppositional defiant disorder, or ODD. Symptoms of ODD include independent thought, rampant creativity, and failure to submit to authority. But now there's a solution. The good people at Pilfer can help you with their time-release, once-daily capsule, Compliacin. Your child won't be able to form his own opinions, let alone express them. It maintains your child's ability to go to a state-run school and perform simple tasks around the house. You won't have to worry about parenting, and the school won't have to deal with your kid asking questions. Compliacin. You'll go from this.
Quit telling me what to do! Quit telling me what to do! Quit telling me what to do!
To this.
Good morning, Mother. I love going to school. And this week we're learning all about how the government is our federal family and they're here to help us.
Compliacin. Talk to your school psychiatrist and ask for it by name.
So you've signed the Shire Society Declaration and are planning your move to New Hampshire to be around more liberty-oriented people. Next, sign up for the Shire Society Forum at forum.shiresociety.com. There are a bunch of people there who are already in the Shire, and they want to meet you. If you're already in the Shire physically, you should also come by the forums. Remember, not everyone uses Facebook. New people are signing up for the Shire Society Forum every month, so drop in and say hello at forum.shiresociety.com. Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. Chat.lrn.fm.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 3 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in New York, I'm Mitch McCann with the Week in Review. US President Donald Trump says the US military will remain in the Middle East to ensure that Iran opens the Strait of Hormuz. In a social media post, Mr. Trump detailed America's non-negotiables ahead of talks with Iran that are taking place in Pakistan. Nick Harper reports from Washington.
Donald Trump is making it clear that he wants what he wants and he's prepared to use the US military to get it. He says that all US ships, aircraft and military personnel with additional ammunition and weaponry will remain in place in and around Iran. That's until both sides reach what he's calling a real agreement. And he flags 2 sticking points, red lines for the US. That Iran must have no nuclear weapons and that the Strait of Hormuz must be open and safe. The US president sticking to those positions and making it clear he will not concede on those points. He said if those don't happen, then the shooting starts. More threats that are showing the cracks in diplomacy ahead of planned talks between the US and Iran in Pakistan. I'm Nick Harper in Washington.
European leaders voiced alarm this week over the situation in Lebanon and its impact on the fragile US-Iran truce. The Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez said Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's contempt for life and international law was intolerable. Ross Cullen reports.
The French Foreign Ministry said the strikes by the IDF were, quote, all the more unacceptable as they jeopardise the temporary ceasefire between the United States and Iran. The IDF said it was targeting Hezbollah sites in Lebanon, but Israeli forces reportedly detained a Spanish UN peacekeeper and fired warning shots at an Italian convoy. Madrid and Rome demanded answers from the Israeli government, with the Italian foreign minister warning of a second Gaza. EU officials also warned that high prices and potential shortages of jet fuel could last into the summer.
Meanwhile, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte said that member countries are doing everything US President Donald Trump had requested to strengthen the military alliance, even if some were initially a bit slow to provide support to America and its war with Iran. Kate Fisher reports from Washington.
The two men met at the White House on Wednesday amid tensions within the alliance over the Iran war. The US president has threatened to withdraw from the transatlantic security alliance in recent weeks. He argues that European allies haven't provided enough support for the US war in Iran while relying on US security guarantees. The NATO chief acknowledged that some allies were a bit slow to support the US. He noted they were also a bit surprised given President Trump opted not to inform them before starting the war. But he argued that today allies are providing a massive amount of support, saying they've heard and are responding to President Trump's requests. On Thursday morning, Mr. Trump posted on social media that NATO was very disappointing.
The fertility rate in the US hit another record low last year. Fresh federal data shows that the number of births fell by 1% to just over 3.6 million. Tony Waterman has more.
The U.S. fertility rate has been in decline since 2007. Nearly 23% fewer babies are born now than then. Teenage pregnancies have seen the sharpest declines and are now sitting at record lows. The data shows that fertility rates among women in their 30s and 40s are actually increasing, but it's not enough to offset a slowdown among younger women. Experts say the high cost of childcare, housing, and a desire by women to have careers are among the many reasons why the fertility rate continues to fall. Tony Waterman, Washington.
And finally, Moscow announced a short-term Easter truce with Ukraine for the weekend. Kiev agreed to respond in kind if Russia indeed observes the proposed ceasefire. The Ukrainian leader also announced that preparations are underway for a new round of settlement talks with Russia, expected in the near future. Daria Bondarchuk has more from Moscow.
The two-day ceasefire announced by Russian President Vladimir Putin is scheduled to begin at 4 p.m. local time on Saturday, April 11, and would last until the end of Sunday, the 12th of April. Moscow said it has seen Kiev's statements that it's ready to support the truce and expects Ukraine to follow Russia's lead. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky promised to act accordingly in case Moscow too refrains from new strikes. He also said that preparations for a new round of settlement talks with Russia and the United States are underway. Negotiations could take place in the form of a trilateral meeting or a round of shuttle diplomacy, with Moscow and Kyiv talking to the American side separately. Daria Bondarchuk, Moscow.
From Feature Story News in New York, I'm Mitch McCann, and that was the Week in Review.
The FBI has successfully executed a raid on the Visa Corporation, exposing what could be the largest credit card scam in U.S. history. According to authorities, the Visa syndicate for years fooled millions of Americans by issuing convincing-looking credit cards carefully designed to dupe consumers into spending far more money than they had. Investigators believe the fraudulent corporation also lured victims in with enticing rewards programs and free gifts, thereby trapping them in a spiral of debt they could never hope to repay. According to the results of a groundbreaking new study, 96% of humans would rather be a singing, dancing animatronic bear. The study finds that a great majority of people on the planet would prefer to trade in their regular lives for one in which they sat on a plastic log, strummed a banjo, and sang songs on a stage with all their goofy bear friends. Respondents also stated that not being a sentient human being with feelings of doubt, sadness, and pain contributed to the decision.
This is the Onion News Network.
You can stick it to the man and big tech. Join our FTL social mastodon at social.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
It's Free Talk Live, talk radio that you control. That means that you can call 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160 to get in on the conversation with us. And you can talk about whatever you want. You can tell us we're wrong. It's up to you. It's Free Talk Live. And with you on Free Talk Live tonight, you've got me, Bonnie.
Mr. Penguin.
And Mark Edge.
And we have lots of things to talk about, but I did want to say you can go to freeiannow.org to sign the petition. Ian Freeman, my husband, and the founder of this show with Mark, he's in prison right now for selling Bitcoin, and you can read all about it at freeiannow.org. And
I'd go so far as to say, I'm begging you, if you haven't taken the time to go to freeiannow.org, please take a moment. I get it. You got a busy life. Please take a moment, because this makes a real difference. We're trying to get a pardon from Donald Trump. And if he's just seeing some small amount of signers there, it's not going to look as good. Please go to freeiannow.org.
Thank you. And we have actually an article about Ian. That's why I wanted to do that. Read this segment.
Yeah, and by the way, it's not just Bitcoin. This is a political persecution here that we're talking about, and It just happens to involve Bitcoin because that was the easiest thing that they could put on a platter to basically get him.
I agree. And in fact,
charged and convicted.
The actual charges don't even include the words Bitcoin or anything like that. It's running an unlicensed money transmitting business, but they applied it to the sale of Bitcoin. So I feel like I can say that without it being like a lie. It's just the thing I say to quickly get attention.
Totally gotcha. I'm just like it's just so frustrating.
Yep. The Joint Terrorism Task Force has been mad at the Free Staters since Chris Cantwell called for violence, and not to blame him or anything.
Long before that, right?
I don't know. I think that has to do with when Chris...
I mean, we're talking about 2 decades, more than 2 decades. Phil Cristiano has been targeting Free
because
Staters.
he came in, was trying to talk to Dave Ridley before that. You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and some others as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, I mean, this guy literally tried to get.
But that's when he
Russell,
got involved with Ian.
Wasn't it Russell that they tried to get him to wear a wire or something?
Yeah, and they tried to talk to Dave
like
Ridley.
More than 25 years ago, something
and
like
Dave
that,
Ridley said, "Sure, I'll talk to you, but I need to be able to film and then put it on the internet." And Phil Christiana said nope and didn't do his little interview with him.
Yeah,
that's pretty entertaining. And I interviewed Dave Ridley about that. You can find it at the Free Talk Live, the channels where you see the Free Talk Live archives, and also the YouTube channel. I did one episode of Bonnie's Activist Archive, and it was an amazing interview of Dave Ridley about all of that like history.
That's cool.
So
there's if you go on Free Keen, there's actually stuff that there's video that goes back 20 years or so, back to the time when Phil Christiana was like went after Russell, was it maybe? Or they confronted Phil Christiana at a courthouse or something, interestingly enough. Or unless maybe that was later on, actually, I'm thinking of. But either way, it might maybe, I think
during Rich Paul's
predates the Rich Paul thing. But,
during Rich Paul's thing.
But they definitely had a Rich Paul
Garrett
too,
Ian, I think it was, filmed him and was asking him all these questions, and he wasn't answering, but he was like looking mad. But anyways.
That might be the video I'm thinking of possibly, but then that would be post
like 2013 or something.
Post the original, one of the earlier incidences.
Yep. But you're right that they were already looking at the Free State just because the government is violence. The government is violent. So when they hear that you are opposing them, in their heads, they're translating that to you might want to use violence against the government. They just don't understand how libertarians' principles work.
Yep.
I think it's also a little bit of the cops and robbers mindset. So Phil Christiana, special agent of the FBI. Hey, these guys that we tried to infiltrate several times are now calling us out on our stuff. I mean, they must be the bad guys. They're against us, and we're the good guys. I know we're the good guys. And then they use whatever means necessary. And
Yep.
I don't know. You need to decide after that.
All we've done is shine light on their bad behavior, and they don't like it. That's what.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great way to put it.
So
Mark, you have the article about Ian that the Activist Post put out this week, which was so great. It was such good timing too, because I had somebody like irritating me on Twitter talking badly about Ian, but that all got taken down. And the next day, I have this great article about Ian. So I definitely wanted to shed some light on it. Stu has been a reader of the Activist Post, and he's been using it on the shows he does recently. So I'm wondering, did they hear about Ian's case because Stu was reading it on the air? That'd be pretty cool. I don't know, though.
I don't know either. I mean, I think that the Activist Post is written by the folks at Free Thought Project to some extent, right?
I don't know, honestly.
Oh, if it is, that might be the connection. They probably would have heard about it for sure then.
Okay.
Well, they did an interview with me.
Yeah.
So, anyway, that's probably a year ago at this point.
Nice.
Activistpost.com. Looks like it's written by Matt Agarist. While the political establishment buries the names of elite predators and engineers foreign bloodshed to distract the masses, a peaceful man is losing nearly a decade of his life in a federal cage for the crime of helping people bypass the fiat banking cartel. The glaring reality of the American justice system is not that it is broken, but that it functions exactly as intended to protect the elite while crushing the peaceful and creative. To see this in action, you need look no further than the fact that years after the most public child trafficking ring in history was exposed, not a single one of Jeffrey Epstein's high-profile American clients has seen the inside of a jail cell. Just look at the absolute theater surrounding the Epstein files. This administration actually campaigned on a platform of transparency, promising to finally expose this elite predator ring to the world.
Much less.
First,
they haven't even been named in a lot of cases. There are accusations in the Epstein files where it's somebody reported to the FBI, hey, this person did this horrendous thing to me, and they will black out the name, much less put them in jail. You know what I mean? Like, they're protecting these predators in every which way.
Indeed. Could you finish reading this for me?
Yeah,
Bonnie?
No problem.
Thanks.
I got to pull it up, but
yeah, no problem. It's just that I'm having a difficult time seeing right here. It's just at the wrong length, and I'm having connectivity issues. So I want to make sure that there's no dropout or anything.
Okay. So far I can hear you just fine, but for some reason it's not easily popping up. Just activist post Ian Freeman. Maybe activist post isn't like, maybe they're just thinking I'm talking about like, or that's just a search term, activist posting about Ian Freeman or something. You see what I mean? So it's like I gotta actually go and look for it here.
I've just sent it to you on Signal if that matters for anything.
Well, unfortunately, I don't have Signal on my computer. Okay, activism. Maybe that's what it's under. No, they didn't put it under activism. There it is. Okay,
activistpost.com?
Yep, no, I'm at Activist Post now, but I finally found it. So the last thing you said, none of them have seen the inside of a jail cell, says, just look at the absolute theater surrounding the Epstein files. This administration actually campaigned on a platform of transparency, promising to finally expose this elite predator ring to the world. First, we were told the unredacted files were on the desk, ready for total declassification. Then the narrative abruptly shifted. The administration claimed the files didn't even exist, later dismissing the justifiable public outcry as nothing more than a Democrat hoax. It was insane. That was the craziest gaslighting. When they finally did dump a batch of documents under immense pressure, it was a masterclass in state-sponsored cover-ups. Tens and thousands of pages with the names of the biggest political and financial power players heavily redacted or mysteriously scrubbed from the DOJ's website overnight. Yeah, one thing that was odd that happened is that I was saving URLs, and that wasn't the best way to be saving different files for something I wanted to work on. And when I revisited them in 2 weeks, and I had them labeled under my like bookmarks, they were totally different files. So they like changed URLs.
Really?
Yes. Very weird.
Interesting.
But the true sleight of hand happened next. Just as the heat on the Epstein cover-up was reaching a boiling point, the war drums began beating for Iran. It is no coincidence that the state escalated a catastrophic overseas conflict precisely when they needed a massive distraction from the predators operating within their own ranks. Possibly high up in their ranks. I added that. As I pointed out recently, Google Trends data exposes this manipulation perfectly. The exact moment the media manufactured interest in Iran skyrocketed, the public's focus on the Epstein files flatlined. The political class effectively engineered a bloodbath to change the news cycle, and now the trafficking network that serviced the world's most powerful people has conveniently vanished from the headlines. It should be like the number one thing people talk about. We live in a world where government actors can orchestrate this kind of mass slaughter, like the horrifying reality of the state murdering over 100 schoolgirls in Iran, and absolutely no one faces justice. The politicians and enforcers responsible for these atrocities will never spend a fraction of a second behind bars, nor will they ever even offer an apology for the blood on their hands. Meanwhile, Ian Freeman, a man whose only so-called crime was facilitating voluntary cryptocurrency exchanges, sits rotting in a federal cage. The juxtaposition is sickening, but it perfectly illustrates the priorities of a ruling class that views individual liberty as a far greater threat than systemic predation and mass slaughter of children. When a peaceful man in New Hampshire helps people bypass the fiat banking cartel using Bitcoin, the full force of the empire is brought down upon his head. Freeman's conviction is a masterclass in prosecutorial overreach and judicial acrobatics. Wow, this guy's great. As we noted in a previous breakdown of this political imprisonment, so they have a previous article about Ian. He was effectively railroaded for supposedly conspiring to launder money with an undercover federal agent. Under well-established federal law, it is legally impossible to form a criminal conspiracy with a government agent, yet the First Circuit Court of Appeals enthusiastically upheld this 8-year sentence anyway when they officially denied his appeal. They threw an innocent man in a cage over regulatory infractions and the testimony of an IRS agent who admitted under oath that Freeman might actually owe nothing in taxes.
That right there creates reasonable doubt, and yet the jury convicted anyway.
Yep.
It's really stunning. I couldn't believe when the convictions were handed down. I get the unlicensed money transmission. I'm not conceding it. I'm not saying he's guilty of it, but I understand where they're coming from. This idea that somehow he colluded with no one, right? Like people he'd never met, Or that's probably a better way to state it. He colluded with people he never met.
It's even more misleading because he denied. He explicitly said, "No, I will not sell you Bitcoin to the undercover agent."
That's right. That too. And then when it came to the tax evasion, the highest level of tax fraud, right, is tax evasion. You need to have a tax burden. It needs to be clearly stated. There's never been a piece of paper, never, not even to this day, been a piece of paper that has said Ian Freeman owes this amount of money for 2015, 2016, 2017, and 2018, or whatever the years were. It's pretty close to that.
Yeah, I don't know.
And that's absolutely ridiculous, but the judge let it stand.
The IRS agent said something like it's a guess or something. Like, it was absolutely crazy. Like, it's a guesstimate of what he might owe or something.
That was one thing that they were like, yeah, and this is based on some certain criteria. This is a guesstimate of what he might owe. And then Mark Sissy, Ian's lawyer, to his credit, said, so it's since this is a guesstimate, that means it's possible that Ian owes nothing. And the IRS agent was like, correct. And he basically mic dropped and walked back to his
what more do you need in order to get a not guilty verdict? You know, at
least on those charges. At least
I think there was some amount of I don't even know how to phrase this. Like, I don't want to say there was a conspiracy, but there was some amount of conspiracy, I guess, like, in the fact that he was convicted. Like, the question is, why would the jury come back saying he's guilty of something when he's clearly not guilty? And it's did they not understand what was going on, or did they understand what was going on, but like somebody convinced them to vote, you know, guilty on all the charges even though he wasn't guilty? Like, what happened there? Was it there was some hater, I think, in the against the Free Staters in that jury? Was that it? Was that what happened?
I think it's that easy. Is that juries are just easy to convince, and I think that another part was a big error on the part of Ian's attorney to not create a narrative. I suggested a narrative early on, and I think it undermines pretty much everything that they have said about him. Is that most people look like they tried to make it look like Ian was ripping off little old ladies.
Sure.
Ian had, in the form of the Shire Free Church, the Shire Free Church takes care of Ian's bills. There was never going to be an issue on Ian getting paid, right? Like, Ian didn't do what he did for money. No. And all the three of us know that's true, but the jury never knew it.
Yeah.
They didn't. Ian's lawyer did a horrible job and didn't do a good job explaining things like that. Like, I think he should have. It almost sounds crass to some people, but I think he should have pointed out that Ian didn't have to ever work again if he didn't want to. You know,
it's true.
So why would he go through all this
Ian
to make
Freeman
a few
had enough
bucks?
money. He could have left us all high and dry, gone to the Rio de Janeiro, and spent the rest of his life sipping cocktails on a lounge chair with beautiful women all around.
Yeah,
seriously.
It blows my mind. Ian's the most generous. He's the nicest, most generous person I've ever met. And yet they went after him like a vicious dog. And it's just like, what is wrong?
He's the biggest threat to their existence.
These people, you know? Clearly he's a threat to their existence because they're bad people. But
exactly.
It's like, can't you just not be bad? And then he's not as much of a, I mean, maybe he's still a little bit of a threat to your existence, but he's not as much of a threat to your existence. I mean, he's not like, I don't know. It just, yeah, it's disgusting.
It's the bankers. The bankers can't just not be bad because it is the nature of their trade.
Yeah, I mean, the bankers, like any industry, the bankers do not want competition. And so in some respects, some of these laws actually do work in their favor. I don't know if people have noticed this, but over the last, 50 years, probably, at least maybe 30 years, whatever, it doesn't really matter, 30, 40, 50 years, the banking industry has consolidated and consolidated and consolidated and consolidated. So it used to be we had independent banks all over the country. Every town had their own, whatever, something national bank, even though there was only maybe one location or a couple locations, right? And then as time went on, bank after bank after bank, the bigger banks bought the smaller banks, and it just kept going until now we've got like a handful of banks, And these laws that add regulations, this is to their advantage because it makes it impossible to start a new bank. Now this isn't the U.S. This is the U.K. But there hasn't been a new bank in like the UK and something like, or maybe it's Great Britain's, I don't know specifically, but somewhere in the UK, or maybe all of UK, in something like 150 or 200 years. Think about that for a moment. Not a single new bank in 150 to 200 years. I don't remember the exact number, but there's a documentary on this that you can research and just do it.
Good, because I'm curious. I mean, I've seen things that I would call new banks, but I don't know much about it.
So this is the UK now, remember, not the United States. Okay. So that might not be true in the United States, but at least in the UK, it's Dave of Bank. I think
every bank in the United States.
Dave of Bank. Search for Dave of Bank. I think is in the name of the movie.
Yeah, basically every bank in the United States is a franchisee of the Federal Reserve System. I mean, it's all the same bank.
Yeah, right. Yep. Yeah, and if you ever do a wire transfer outside the United States, you'll actually, it won't be blatantly clear, but you can tell because every single like bank in the United States has to go through like a central bank, I think, in order to do an external wire transfer outside the United States. It's that crazy.
Yep.
Well, continuing on this article about Ian from the activistpost.com, it's just activistpost.com. The financial destruction the state has leveled against him, Ian, is just as absurd as the cage they put him in. In addition to his 8-year sentence, a federal judge ordered Freeman to pay over $3.5 million in restitution to victims of internet romance scams.
Not his victims, mind you.
Exactly.
Victims of third-party scammers that he had nothing to do with and he had no knowledge of, which the prosecutor agreed or admitted.
Great point, Chris, because the next part of the sentence says, scams carried out by third parties Freeman didn't know and never colluded with. It's great.
The prosecutor agreed with this.
Yep, but they weren't allowed to call them Ian's victims during the trial.
I can't emphasize this enough. No, they couldn't say it directly, so they implied it.
They wanted the jury to think these poor old people, these like 9 people out of the thousands and thousands Ian sold Bitcoin to, who were scammed by a third party. Someone needs to pay for this.
And the crazy thing is the statistics, the numbers. So there were something like 10,000 reviews amongst
on localbitcoins.com where Ian was selling Bitcoin.
Yeah, so there was a couple different accounts, but anyway, the point was of those charged of the Crypto 6, there was about 10,000 reviews online. Of those, they were able to find something like 40 so-called what they're calling victims, and that's actually, think about that in terms of like the how few,
percentages.
Yeah, in terms of a percentage, how few people were victims here. And then if you take a deeper look into this, they're only going to put the most how do I put it, the most the saddest basically victims up on the stand, right? And if you look at those so-called victims, one of them was an actual money launderer. Okay, not that Ian knew about it at the time.
Yeah.
One of them was, a multi-millionaire who should have known better. She was a
financial planner.
Planner.
She argued with Ian's lawyer, saying like, "I'm perfectly capable of being a financial planner, even in my old age." And we're like, "What? Aren't you here to complain that you were taken advantage of because you're so old?" It's like,
and the story was even crazier. It was she was in love with some online person, or online she was in love with a person she's never met. Who I think, if I recall correctly, she tried to meet, but she failed on 2 occasions.
I don't know about that, but I know that they told her that they worked for Exxon, the oil company.
An oil platform.
We need a new oil rig. Can you pay for it? And they'll have my company pay you back? That's so dumb.
It was the most insane, thing that I've never heard of anybody.
And it's just one thing if somebody's crazy old grandma who's in a home falls for that, and we're like, you're so dumb. This is a woman who is dressed extremely well and up there arguing with Ian's lawyer that she is very competent.
Right. We're literally talking about $1 trillion industries here, guys. Each one of these platforms we're talking about billions of dollars. There's no way. The idea that the taxes on it, even if there was some truth to it, it doesn't even even make sense that you'd only need the hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mean, we're talking millions of dollars, not hundreds of thousands. Like the whole
a large company would never ask somebody's girlfriend to pay, and it will just pay you back for the oil rig. It's crazy. More Free Talk Live coming up. 603-283-6160. Last segment to get your calls in. That's 603-283-6160. More Free Talk Live coming up.
The Free State Project has reached its goal of 20,000 liberty lovers who've pledged to move to New Hampshire and get active to achieve liberty in our lifetime. Perhaps you're trying to figure out what part of New Hampshire should be your destination. If so, consider Keene. You'll find more than 150 reasons to move to Keene at move.freekeene.com. Keene is famous for its historic, publicity-generating activism, as well as being the liberty media capital of the world. It's home to freekeene.com, New Hampshire's destination for liberty activism, news, and opinion. For years, we've been compiling over 150 reasons to move to Keene at move.freekeene.com, where you'll learn about some of what's happening here and what makes Keene a great place to live. If you love liberty, you'll probably enjoy anywhere you end up in the Shire. But do your due diligence first. Please visit move.freekeene.com for the full list of over 150 reasons to move to Keene. That's move.freekeene.com.
From Feature Story News in New York, I'm Mitch McCann with the Week in Review. US President Donald Trump says the US military will remain in the Middle East to ensure that Iran opens the Strait of Hormuz. In a social media post, Mr. Trump detailed America's non-negotiables ahead of talks with Iran. Nick Harper reports from Washington.
Donald Trump is making it clear that he wants what he wants and he's prepared to use the US military to get it. He says that all US ships, aircraft and military personnel with additional ammunition and weaponry will remain in place in and around Iran. That's until both sides reach what he's calling a real agreement. And he flags two sticking points, red lines for the US, that Iran must have no nuclear weapons and that the Strait of Hormuz must be open and safe. The US president sticking to those positions and making it clear he will not concede on those points. He said if those don't happen, then the shooting starts. More threats that are showing the cracks in diplomacy ahead of planned talks between the US and Iran in Pakistan. I'm Nick Harper in Washington.
European leaders voiced alarm this week over the situation in Lebanon and its impact on the fragile US-Iran truce. The Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez said Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's contempt for life and international law was intolerable. Ross Cullen reports.
The French Foreign Ministry said the strikes by the IDF were, quote, all the more unacceptable as they jeopardise the temporary ceasefire between the United States and Iran. The IDF said it was targeting Hezbollah sites in Lebanon, but Israeli forces reportedly detained a Spanish UN peacekeeper and fired warning shots at an Italian convoy. Madrid and Rome demanded answers from the Israeli government, with the Italian foreign minister warning of a second Gaza. EU officials also warned that high prices and potential shortages of jet fuel could last into the summer.
Meanwhile, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte said that member countries are doing everything US President Donald Trump had requested to strengthen the military alliance, even if some were initially a bit slow to provide support to America and its war with Iran. Kate Fisher reports from Washington.
The two men met at the White House on Wednesday amid tensions within the alliance over the Iran war. The US president has threatened to withdraw from the transatlantic security alliance in recent weeks. He argues that European allies haven't provided enough support for the US war in Iran while relying on US security guarantees. The NATO chief acknowledged that some allies were a bit slow to support the US. He noted they were also a bit surprised, given President Trump opted not to inform them before starting the war. But he argued that today allies are providing a massive amount of support, saying they've heard and are responding to President Trump's requests.
From Feature Story News in New York, I'm Mitch McCann, and that was the Week in Review.
Don't miss a moment of Free Talk Live. Get our archives daily via our podcast at feeds.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live, talk radio you control. That means that you can call 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160 to get in on the conversation with us. And if you're tired of the oppressive rules and moderation of the big tech social media sites, our Mastodon server at social.freetalklive.com can set you free. Mastodon is free, open source, decentralized, and federated. Multiple apps are available for iOS, Android, Windows, Mac, and Linux. That's social.freetalklive.com. And with you on Free Talk Live, you've got me, Bonnie.
And Mr. Penguin.
And Mark Edge.
And we already have a caller on the line, so I'm going to go to the phones and to the fun. We have David from New Mexico on Free Talk Live. David, you're on Free Talk Live. What's on your mind?
What do you mean already? I've been on hold for 6 hours, dude.
What? No, you haven't.
What?
Well, I said you haven't.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I'm lying. I forgot. So let's see. Bonnie invited me to call in and argue, you guys. So I was going to ask you what you'd like to argue about, but actually you said a couple of things, so I got ideas. Let's see. There was two. Oh, first of all, you're talking about Ian. That's all good. But let me remind you now, and then we can get people that accuse me of having a pity party. But Ian is in a what do you call it, a camp. There's no walls. There's no barbed wire. There's no guard shacks with M4s, M16s.
There's no walls. Have you been there? I've been there once now, and there are walls. It's actually like a little city.
Since you invited me to argue with you, to describe the walls.
Okay, so he moved to a location from Devens, Massachusetts to Lewisburg, Pennsylvania.
So wait, is this the new location or the old one?
The new location.
Okay, the new location.
And so
walls.
basically, I followed the directions from my hotel to the place, and it took me to a opening to this place that only trucks with deliveries are allowed to go into. So it was like completely walled off. It's like a military base type of thing. It never was a military base. It's just like the way it's set up. It genuinely is a wall. And I was like, what the heck? So I just had to drive in circles through like cow fields. Very beautiful cow fields though. And it was really, I was like, oh my God, this place is so pretty. It's so sad that there's a prison right there. Anyways, and then you drive in, you actually have to check in at a gate, like a military base. And then you drive through a little neighborhood where the cops actually live with their kids and stuff. You can see their tricycles and stuff in the yards. And it feels like you're on a military base. And then you drive up this hill and there's this weird big tower on this building with a pentagram on it, and I looked up like the building of the building and why it has a pentagram on it and stuff, and their excuse was, oh, the person who built it in 1930 or something like that wanted it to look like a college campus, and they put the pentagram so it looks inviting.
Oh my God.
Look inviting at all. It looks like a witch castle on a hill. But anyways,
okay, so that's the new digs. I only know about the previous one, so that's the one I was speaking of. And I didn't mean to go down that track. I didn't watch my words carefully enough to avoid segueing off of what I was trying to communicate.
All right.
But so anyway, the camp you can walk away from, right? It's that kind of prison, right?
Not really where he's at right now, honestly.
So no.
You mean wandering into
Wait a minute. Let me try to get this train back on the damn track. Did I derail?
I'm sorry that facts derail your. Yeah, like you ask a question, I have an answer to it. Like where he's at right now, you can't just go get on the highway.
That's the problem with human beings, is that human beings can't communicate. When one human being is trying to communicate an idea, the second that they get a sub idea out that another human being relates to in some way, the second human being will hijack the idea and then take the conversation the way that they want to go. That's how humans are effed up.
Okay.
Are you saying that if a prison doesn't have walls, but it has rules that you can't leave, that you're there voluntarily?
No. No. Well, in a way, yeah. You
in a way, I guess you are. But I mean, I'm curious where you're going to take it. Go ahead.
Let me actually say in my own words what I'm.
I mean, it's coerced still, guys. Even if there's no walls.
To say, but you guys have said many, many, many times that Ian could like walk away and get on a jet and never be seen again, but he doesn't. Okay, that's all I'm trying to do is describe the kind of prison that he was in. I don't care about anything else. I was just trying to describe the prison. And then in my own little pity party, what I was trying to add to that is that the this is FCC legal. The goddamn government, or the criminals that hijack your government, they put me in a no-wall prison. Well, my prison has walls too. I'm on home confinement, not literally, but because the government of criminals trafficked my children. That changed the course of my life, and that's the only reason why 20 years later, 15 years after you first talked to me, you're still talking to me now. It's because the criminals in the government changed the course of my life. And what they did is they put me in a prison. Ian is what was in a camp that you can walk away from. I'm on home confinement, sort of, that I can also walk away from, except walking away from my prison meant walking away from my children, which at this point, I don't give a F anymore, okay? So I can walk away now. But for the last goddamned 15 years, I committed to my children and the prison that came with it, and I didn't walk away. That's the only thing I was trying to communicate so that we could move on to what you were talking about, which is more interesting. And what you were talking about that is more interesting, that was the main point and not the stupid little sidetrack we took, was that number one, there are two things, number one and number two. And number one, I've already actually addressed, and that I know, and you guys will deny this because you know this as well, but I don't see you talking about it the way I think that you should. And I said, I think it's my stupid little opinion that you need to declare declarative sentences in an emphatic manner, an exclamatory manner, that your government is not a legitimate government. Why? Because they're criminals. How can we allege they're criminals? Because there's overwhelming evidence that they are criminals. And that is what needs to be said over and over and over again.
Okay. Well, when you make your own radio show, you can say that over and over and over again. I mean, we do go into way more depth of those type of topics all the time. So it's like he's insane.
I don't think that any of us disagree with the general sentiment.
Yeah, none of us disagree with the general sentiment. Last night I was at a party, a libertarian's house, and somebody brought up, it actually used to be better run under the mob. I was like, well, we're still under a mob. It's just that they act like they're legitimate. You know?
Yeah, and the difference between the mob, as people think of it, generally speaking, like gangsters and stuff, and the government takes way more from you than the mobsters.
Gangsters generally did.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, yep, it's true. It's very sad that people get put into these positions. Like, I'm always hearing people say, I wish I could move to the Free State Project, but it's just that they have my kids here and stuff like that, and that's a very legitimate thing. The government is keeping it to where they can only see their kids if they do certain crap in that certain state. That really is a horrible, invisible cage, basically, and it's legitimate.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think I'm probably safe to say that we all would agree that the government does all sorts of horrible things to, parents in general. I mean, it's often male, but it can also happen to females, right? It's not like it's exclusive to one or the other. And the system is really, really, really messed up at that department. I'm actually surprised we haven't talked about over the years more, or had people on the show who've talked about or wanted to talk about, their kids being taken away. We certainly have had people whose kids have been, bad things, governments have done bad things to their kids, but, or maybe temporarily taken away, that kind of thing, or wanted to take the kids away. But I think the only one, Jay Noon, I think his family is the only one that I can think of off the top of my head. And there's one other
that didn't get their kids taken away when DCYF got involved.
Yeah.
There was this guy, I don't want to say his name necessarily because I don't even know if he wants that kind of attention, but literally I just stood at the edge of his property with him in the rain. The DCYF workers drove past us staring at us and then called him and said they were intimidated by our presence there, so they didn't want to come in. So they had to reschedule, and then they just end up calling him or like emailing him or something like 2 weeks later, just telling him that his case had been closed. So the tiniest amount of pushback can sometimes make these people be like, oh no, we can't walk all over these free staters, so we got to leave them alone.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. And it's also interesting too that like sometimes you'll have like certain actions that are taken by other people, but they're effectively doing it on orders of others or requests of others who like they're not getting their hands dirty. So like I think in the Jay Noon case, it was like somebody who worked for the prosecutor's office or something made the requests to investigate or something, if I recall correctly, and so they did, but like I don't know, it was just like it was.
So they dropped their DCYF case, but they continued their criminal case, and they did lose their criminal case, but all that happened was like a suspended sentence, and she had to take classes.
Oh, and did she actually take the classes, or
I think so.
She did. Oh, interesting.
But basically,
what classes for what?
Like parenting classes.
But what did they even accuse her of doing? Like that
her child was taking a nap, so she left the child sleeping in the car with the AC going, and the policeman who arrived on the scene testified that the child looked comfortable and like safe, and yet some woman who worked for the prosecutor's office, like you said, walked up, saw a baby in the car, and freaked out and stood there waiting, and then Shallon came out, and they believe Shallon and Jay say that there's no possible way for it to possibly have been more than 15 minutes, but the woman testified it was like 45 minutes.
No. There were two contradictory statements from two different witnesses
it makes
actually
no sense
as to how long it was. And it was
Mm-hmm.
such a lengthy amount of difference between the two that clearly one of them had to be wrong or lying.
Yep, and the other thing about it is they know that it couldn't have been more than 15 minutes because they have a timer, or they're people have a remote start on their phone or on their car.
Yeah.
It turns off after 15 minutes, and everybody testified that the AC in the car was on the whole time.
Yeah.
So there was like, I don't even think it was close to 15 minutes. You know what I mean? It's not like she just left her baby in the car for an hour.
I don't even think that my memory, maybe my memory is mistaken, but I thought it wasn't warm enough out that day for it to be an issue whether or not there was any AC on even.
In my opinion, it wasn't warm enough that day.
But
it doesn't matter because the AC was on.
I thought the car was on, but I don't remember the AC being
on.
No,
they testified that like there was like the stuff in the car was flying around moving around with the wind, so he could tell that the AC was on.
Okay.
It's like you still, even on a colder day, you wouldn't leave a child in a car with the car off and no AC running because it can heat up.
There's another issue. This was a chilly kind of a little.
It wasn't chilly, like it wasn't winter. It was like a perfect day. In fact, it was like 60 degrees. So it can get too hot for a baby in a car with the AC off. It was not off though, so it's like a non-issue.
Yeah, it was a non-issue. I just remember it was a non-issue ultimately at the end of the day. And
I think so too. I think people used to leave their kids sitting there taking a nap in the car safely, probably with the doors unlocked until recent decades, and it's a parenting choice,
Yeah, I think the other thing it comes down to is that, yes, there is always a little bit of risk, in everything you do, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, did you choose to go to the bathroom and leave your kid, in a playpen? Well, there was a risk you could have choked on something and died while you were in the bathroom, right? I mean, you cannot.
One wonders how long these, the period of time is for these things. Were you guys ever left in the car, by the way?
Yes, with my many siblings, and like usually I'd be like 10 watching a 3-year-old.
We were. I mean, I was left home alone for a couple of hours at a time, here and there when I was fairly young. I mean, like this is just the most ridiculous thing. The question. I mean, sometimes 10
watching a 6-year-old.
It doesn't matter. Like it doesn't even matter in the sense that this is a judgment call of the parent, because the parent knows whether or not there is a danger, and it's not the case that every child, it may not be safe to leave a kid, unattended for an hour, but it might be for one kid, but another kid, it might be perfectly fine.
Yeah. Like one thing she said was like, I know my child, and my child was asleep and would have stayed asleep, but you know what the cop did? Banged on the window and woke up the kid.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I mean, and the other thing is, like, this kid was strapped into the car seat. Like, he wasn't. It wasn't the situation where, like, he's gonna get out and, like, hurt himself.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
exactly.
I mean, it's one thing if, like, a parent knows, like, okay, the kid can get out of their car seat, right? But if the kid can't get out of his car seat by himself, they're not going anywhere.
I think into the weeds on this specific case, but the point is, in New Hampshire, the DCYF, which is the same thing as CPS, Child Protective Services in other states, it tries to go after people's kids all the time for silly things like these kids are homeschooled and not, vaccinated. Seriously, I've been hearing about this kind of thing recently.
Yeah.
And if you just give them the slightest amount of pushback and don't just do everything they say, they say, oh, it's too hard to kidnap these children. We're going to go move on to some other people who don't know their rights.
Yeah, we're not talking about neglect or abuse. And the crazy thing is there is neglect and abuse in our system. And so...
like foster kids and stuff like that? Harmony Montgomery, the little girl who was dead for 3 years before they noticed it?
I mean, the best thing we can do is, like, cut government spending, because then we only end up, and assuming people do their jobs, which is a big assumption here, but assuming people do their jobs, they can only focus on actual kids who are actually in danger, right? As opposed to what we have is a glut, which is exactly how these cases end up coming about, is because there's a glut of government that then means, well, what do? I mean, do you sit there all day doing, twiddling your fingers because you don't have enough work to do?
Right. I mean, it's what it comes down to is the DCYF is created so the people who are molesting their kids have them taken away from them, and I can see that the vast majority of Americans probably think that's a good idea, but one wonders about kids walking home from school. This was normal a few years ago, and now it's considered child abuse. Kids being homeschooled, any variety of things that these kids being left in a car. And I get, you leave a kid in a car for 8 hours without the air conditioning running, that's bad. But there are systems that you can leave a kid in the car for. What if you're just walking the cart back to the cart corral?
Yeah, and some busybody happens to see it. It's like this woman, it's like if she really cared, she could have stayed in her car, because she said she parked next to the car and that's how she saw the baby in there.
Yeah.
It's like she could have stayed in her car and just kept an eye on things because she was so afraid this baby was going to get kidnapped. And if she really was mad about the behavior of Shallon, she could have told Shallon off when she saw her. You know what I mean?
And the other crazy thing is, like, the Shallon showed up. Like, it wasn't like the cops waited and had to break into the car, right?
And the whole time
Shallon showed up before they did anything, even, right? Like, it was literally,
other than knock on the window and wake up the freaking baby.
Like, it's I swear to, it's like, and it's not. It's yes, there are certainly there's certainly dangers, but we need to stop sacrificing our freedoms for the tiniest bit of safety. And I'm going to put safety in quotes because most of the time it doesn't really make us any safer. And I don't doubt that there are people, who leave their kids in the car and the kids die, but there's a huge difference between leaving your kid in a car for a few minutes while you run inside because you forgot something and grab a thing of milk and you're going to be back within a few minutes, right? Like there's a huge difference between that and leaving your kid in the car while you go into work, right? And they're going to be you're going to be working for the next 6 to 8 hours or whatever, right? Like there is a huge difference between these two things, guys. And clearly, the 10, 15 minutes or even 45 minutes is not neglect or abuse.
Right. And these are just bored bureaucrats.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That was probably the most interesting thing that happened to her that day. And you know what else is very interesting? That day was the same day as this huge Free Stater and Republican run health and body freedom, not body freedom like that, but health and body autonomy type protest
COVID
outside of during COVID. It was like 2021, I think, or maybe 2022, but either way, in front of the State House there was a huge, over 1,000 people were in front of the State House protesting the mandates, like the vaccine mandates and other health freedom issues. And so everybody knew that, and Shallon's car has all these Free Stater bumper stickers on it, and this woman is a statist, so that's a little interesting to me. You know what I mean? Like she was looking for something to get these Free Staters. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So
could very well be.
anyways, we were talking,
and that's the sort of thing that, to some extent, we've signed up for here. And I mean, it's just one of the difficulties. It's a battle.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think it's safe to say that we're all sacrificing. Everybody who moves is sacrificing a little bit of. I don't know if freedom is the right choice of word here, but we're sacrificing a little bit in order to try and improve things.
Yeah, like some people may have never lived in a place where they were hated by everyone. I actually already did that, so maybe it's kind of like normal to me because I lived in a government place with a whole bunch of government workers, and in fact, they were like contractors. And I started posting about cop violence, and everybody hated me.
Yep, it's certainly easier if Shalyn hadn't put those Free Stater stickers on her car and she hadn't moved to New Hampshire. I seriously doubt anybody would have, called the cops on her, right? But it's because she stood up and took a stand against, statism that she was targeted.
And it's the only possibility for a future where her kids can actually live a free life. So, I also think that having Free Stater stickers on my car actually helps me because I almost never get pulled over.
Yeah. I mean, definitely. I mean, if you show up in the system when they scan your plate or whatever, they avoid you like the plague, man.
Like, can you imagine you're a bureaucrat or a cop and you're like deciding between two cars to pull over and one of them has a porcupine on it? Like, that you might get pushed back and filmed and questioned back by the one car, and the other one is just some random statist.
You might lose your job.
It's hard to know. Because it could be that you're looking for a fight. I mean, one of our complaints here is that Ian Freeman got locked up because there's a special agent of the FBI that has a vendetta against him. I suspect there's other law enforcement that are a little lower down the ladder that probably have a similar vendetta. It could go either way.
It could. Mark, I think you're right. It could go either way. I think the best way to describe it is, often we're just not worth dealing with.
Yeah,
for
exactly.
Your average
it hasn't
cop.
gone the other way for most people I know in the state who have like porcupine stickers on their car. And the other thing about it is when I first got here, literally the first night I met Ian, there were some cops trying to arrest some college kid. So we all walked over there to film the interaction. And the cops were being so polite to Ian. They're like, "How you doing, Freeman?" And he's like, "Good. How are you guys doing tonight?" And I when we walked away, I was like, "How did you know those cops?" Like I was kind of creeped out. And he was like, "Oh, in New Hampshire, we have trained the cops to be on their best behavior around us." And I was literally like mind blown.
I mean, keep in mind, this took decades and decades.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Training.
This is specifically Keene, I believe, right? That you're referencing?
Yeah, this was in Keene.
It's true. It's not just Keene, but it's just particularly Keene.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they
don't want to deal with it.
They really don't.
I've never been pulled over in Keene for sure. Like anytime I have been pulled over for speeding, it's been outside of Keene.
So I've only been pulled over once, and the guy didn't know at first because he only caught me at a glance, and he noticed one of my headlights was out, and he pulled me over. And actually, the funniest thing happened. As I'm leaving, he thanked me.
For what?
He thanked me. I think it was something that, I don't remember specifically the exact words, but he was thanking me something to the effect for like not giving him a hard time. And
nice.
It was because of this perception, and he clearly, once he pulled up to the car or whatever, he somehow at some point identified me, and he realized who I was. And it was, so he didn't actually say specifically, like technically there's a possibility he didn't, but it was pretty clear the way he worded it that almost certainly he did know, he knew who I was, and he was like, and he was probably rolling his eyes
as a Montana plate
as he realized who he just pulled over. And then after I didn't give him a hard time, he was like, "Thank you for not giving me a hard time." And I was just like, "Wow, that's just pretty funny."
It's pretty funny. Ian and his crew trained the courts to know that they get filmed when we're on trial.
Oh yeah,
and train the cops to know that they're not just going to walk all over us with no pushback.
And the thing is, they look stupid. They look really, really stupid when they get up there and testify, because most of these cops really are kind of stupid. And at the end of the day, it's like they don't want to look stupid, and they know if they do go up on the stand and we film them, they're going to look stupid. And yeah.
It's been Free Talk Live. You can go to freetalklive.com for more, and on X we're at Free Talk Live. Thank you for listening. Peace.
So the protection of life, liberty, and property is what the Free State Project is all about. But it's an effort to move 20,000 people who understand.
It's about demonstrating to the entire country
that, yeah, we can have a free market, a truly free market.
Making it just a freer, great place to live.
It's the world's largest voluntarist libertarian community, and it's only getting bigger.
That's amazing, to be able to move to a place where other people passionately believe in being free and independent.
What the Free State Project is managing to do, though, is to put their money where their mouth